Chapter 621, The Fei Family Today, II. Li Qingheng, now a mid-stage Foundation establishment realm cultivator, commanded authority, leaving Fei Tongyu too intimidated to protest. He bowed deeply and led the way. As they landed on the snow-covered peak, their gaze fell upon a hall with its roof sealed shut, a peculiar sight. Having stayed with the Fei family for a few years in the past, Li Qingheng was familiar with their traditions. Typically, their courtyards were left open to admire the moon and snow. Finding the hall sealed piqued her curiosity, and she cast a questioning glance. Fei Tongyu quickly explained, "That was where my younger brother lived during his life. He never cared for moonlit nights and had the hall roofed over intentionally. During his life." Li Qingheng's expression shifted, and she pressed him further. "What do you mean? What happened to your brother, Fei Tingxiao?" Fei Tongyu lowered his head, his face flushed with shame as he maintained a deferential posture. He replied, "He failed to break through to the Foundation establishment realm. He has since merged into the cold wind and snow and is gone. Fei Tingxiao is dead." Li Qingheng paused, genuinely stunned. She had not expected that this man, with his steadfast ambition, would have risked and lost his life in attempting the Foundation establishment realm breakthrough. The sudden realization of the passing of an old acquaintance left her at a loss for words. Tears welled in Fei Tongyu's eyes as he murmured, "It happened a few years ago." Li Qingheng fell silent. The two continued their walk, eventually arriving at Fei Wangbai's grave. The gravestone, overgrown with purple moss, appeared especially forlorn amidst the snow. Recalling the teacher-student relationship they had once shared, Li Qingheng offered a brief moment of prayer at the grave before they proceeded further up the snowy mountain. Cresting the ridge, a familiar pavilion came into view. Years ago, she had practiced spear techniques in that very pavilion. Fei Tingxiao would visit her there every day, climbing up the mountainside each time. Decades had passed, yet the small pavilion remained intact. They sat at a stone table in the courtyard. As soon as Fei Tongyu sat down, he began to weep, the years of hardship etched plainly into his weary demeanor. In a hoarse voice he said, "My younger brother. He passed away 3 years ago. Before he died, he left me a letter to give to you. I was instructed by Qingyi not to send anyone to deliver it until you arrived." He retrieved a small letter, barely the size of a palm, from his storage pouch. Li Qingheng lowered her almond-shaped eyes to examine it. On its surface, a few simple lines were written. "Senior sister, Tingxiao was foolish and could not achieve success. In my youth, I rashly disturbed you, but I am grateful I did not hinder your cultivation. Yet, senior sister, for 48 winters among the pines and snow of this cold mountain, my heart has been as firm as these hills, unwavering." Fei Tingxiao had once studied alongside her as disciples of Fei Wangbai, but they all knew it was merely a political arrangement between the two families. Fei Wangbai had imparted little of real value to any of them, and after leaving his tutelage, they had gone their separate ways, never speaking of it again. That word senior sister was one she had not heard in decades. The inked handwriting was simple and unadorned. Li Qingheng examined it closely for a moment, then turned her head away. In a quiet voice she asked, "Did your brother leave any descendants?" Fei Tongyu replied, "He never took a wife, nor did he take concubines." Li Qingheng put the letter away and turned her face aside, exposing the snow-white nape of her neck. Her voice turned hoarse as she murmured, "Why? Why did he have to?" Fei Tongyu closed his eyes as tears streamed down his face. He clutched his father's letter tightly in his hands but did not dare to open it. Instead, he kept his head lowered, staring at the cracks in the bricks on the floor. Both he and Li Qingheng remained silent, each consumed by their own thoughts. After a long while, Li Qingheng suddenly seemed to awaken from her reverie. She raised her delicate head and softly said, "Fei family." The words, "Do your best to shape up," hovered on her lips, but she did not voice them. Instead, she cupped her fist in farewell. As she turned to leave, she lightly plucked a plum blossom from the potted tree at the doorway and departed in a flash of lightning. Fei Tongyu kneeled in place, his trembling hands carefully opening the letter. When he saw the familiar handwriting, a low sob escaped from his lips. Li Qingheng soared away on the wind. She found Li Xuanfeng standing by the lakeside, staring blankly toward the scenery at the lake's center. Seeing her land, he murmured, "They say that second uncle came with black hair and white robes, sword in hand. What a sight that must have been." Letter 1E5F a circumflex letter 16 data omelette. He lifted his gaze to look at Li Qingheng and noticed a faint melancholy in her expression. "How was it?" he asked. "Nothing of consequence," she replied, shaking her head. "An old friend failed to break through and perished." Li Xuanfeng joined her as they flew southward. After a moment's pause, he said, "Do not dwell on it too much. With our long lifespans, we will witness such things many times over." Li Qingheng nodded silently. When the two landed back at the mountain, Li Xuanfeng said, "I have a few other visits to make. You may focus on your cultivation." Li Qingheng, already weary in spirit, nodded in agreement and forced herself to steady her emotions. As she descended to the peak, the sound of rain filled the air, its steady patter covering the entire mountain. She had only walked a short distance when she found Li Zijian waiting for her at the mountaintop. Seeing his aunt arrive, he stepped forward and spoke softly. Most of the family matters have been settled. I have also extracted Li Wuxiao's spirituality and entrusted it to Yu Xiang. For the next few years, the household will need both you and Yu Xiang to keep a close watch. Hearing this, Li Qingheng immediately understood his intentions. As expected, Li Zijian added, I will be entering seclusion to prepare for breaking through to Foundation Establishment Realm. Li Qingheng asked, have you prepared the necessary elixirs? Li Zijian smiled faintly and pulled a white jade bottle from his robe. The essence-gathering pill. Brother Ming gave me the one he had. Only then did Li Qingheng breathe a sigh of relief. In a low voice, she muttered, at least he still has some sense of decency. Li Zijian laughed heartily, clearly in good spirits. After a brief hesitation, he spoke softly, if I fail, I hope you can show some leniency to Ziming. In the family, Qingliu is capable and resourceful, and as for Cheng Huai, while he does not have his father's talent, he is still quite promising. Please treat them both well. He rambled on, repeating himself in various ways. Li Qingheng listened intently before finally saying, enough, enough. Do not talk about such inauspicious things. Li Zijian chuckled, clasping his hands together and bowing deeply. Li Qingheng glanced at the rain clouds above, performed a quick calculation with her fingers, and thought to herself, I wonder when this rain will finally clear. Will winter be delayed this year? She then said, since you are preparing to break through to the Foundation Establishment Realm, it is better to go to Mount Yuding. The pines and snow there create a setting that is perfectly symbolic. Li Zijian, having already considered this, frowned slightly, but the spiritual energy there is not dense enough. Here, Li Qingheng said. She patted her storage pouch and a green jade bottle floated out. Speaking gently, she said, this is the Foundation Establishment Realm spirit item known as Yuwa Spirit Liquid. The ancestor brought it back. While I was in the Eastern Sea, I learned a technique to vaporize it, which will enhance the spiritual energy in the area for a few years, just enough to aid your breakthrough. Li Zijian immediately understood that this was originally meant for Li Ziming, but recognizing the urgency of his own situation, he didn't argue. Bowing respectfully, he said, then I will trouble you for this, aunt. Chapter 622, White Cicada Scaled Beast Eye. The rain over Munga's lake had continued for 2 months. The rainfall was clear and pure, causing the lake to swell and overflow, yet it made the entire body of water even more pristine. Li Qingliu activated his mana as he stood in the rain, gazing down. In front of him, on the muddy shore, 2 rows of massive bluestone dikes stood tall. The rising waters of the lake had crept ever closer to 2 nearby towns. Just the night before, Li Zicheng had made a decision in the main hall, and by dawn, the stone dikes had emerged from the ground. The lake water, created by a celestial anomaly, was not exactly a spirit treasure, but its sheer volume and flow had become quite powerful. Ordinary embankments could not withstand such force. If left unattended, the water might eventually flood the mountain foot. Several unrefined Qi cultivators were pacing along the dike, inspecting the formations. When they saw Li Qingliu looking their way, they respectfully cupped their fist and bowed. Li Qingliu, always warm and composed, nodded graciously and personally checked the dikes. Building such embankments was no major task for the Li family, but since it concerned the livelihood of the people, Li Qingliu, as the one managing the clan's affairs, naturally had to oversee it himself. Despite his father, Li Zicheng, being the family head, Li Qingliu had been taught since childhood not to grow complacent. Standing next to him was his uncle Nsiwei, who held a long spear. The Ren family had an excellent bloodline, and Nsiwei was now at the 8th heavenly layer of Qi cultivation realm, skilled in multiple techniques and boasting considerable strength. Li Qingliu finished his inspection quickly and descended, landing near a group of cultivators gathering in the rain. He said, the construction is decent. Patrol carefully. If this embankment fails and the water floods the towns. An elderly cultivator wearing a conical hat immediately cupped his fist and assured him, young master, rest assured. The clan rules are etched in our hearts. Satisfied, Li Qingliu departed. As he flew toward the foot of the mountain, his brows remained furrowed, reflecting his troubled thoughts. He politely dismissed Nsiwei and entered the backyard. Pushing open the side chamber door, he found his wife lying on a couch, her face pale and drowsy. Li Qingliu sat beside her and, noticing her lips were nearly colorless, frowned slightly. What is going on? He called out, and his gaze fell on the traces of shattered porcelain on the ground. A nearby maid trembled and replied softly, Madam. Madam has already drunk a great deal of water. Li Qingliu had noticed this issue for some time. Now, when he touched his wife's forehead, he found her body burning hot. The ominous feeling in his chest deepened. He looked her over carefully, growing anxious as he tucked the covers around her. Rising abruptly, he began pacing and said, Take good care of her. I will head to Qingdu. Quickly, he strode out of the hall, grabbed the white robe hanging at the entrance, and draped it over his shoulders. The usually calm and composed look on his face darkened with worry. He shot into the air, wind swirling as he flew straight toward Mount Qingdu, only to remember that his 8th uncle, Li Zijian, was in seclusion. Gritting his teeth, Li Qinglao turned and flew to Talisman Peak to seek the Grand Elder Li Xuanxuan. Talisman Peak was eerily empty. Li Xuanxuan had never liked keeping servants around, even from his youth. Li Qinglao easily entered the main hall. As he approached, he heard a powerful, sonorous voice from within. Ning Dingbo reports that Yuan Tuan has been sent to the Eastern Sea markets. If you ask me, the Yuan family. The voice's owner seemed to sense him and stopped abruptly. Li Qinglao quickly kneeled, bowed deeply, and said respectfully, "Qinglao greets the two great ancestors." Li Xuanfeng, whose presence was the most imposing of all, stood as a towering figure of reverence within the family. Li Qinglao, though composed, felt his heart drum nervously. Bowing low, all he could see were the long boots inlaid with black and gold. From above, he heard Li Xuanxuan's low voice introduce him. "This is your grandnephew, Li Qinglao." Li Xuanfeng gave a soft response, allowing Li Qinglao to rise. Li Qinglao quickly stood up, his eyes meeting this fearsome elder for the first time. Surprisingly, those dark gray eyes did not appear as severe as rumored. Instead, they carried a faint warmth as he looked Li Qinglao up and down. Li Xuanfeng seemed to be reminiscing about something, though Li Qinglao dared not delay. He spoke in a serious tone, "My wife. It has been 11 months since her first pregnancy, but there are no signs of delivery. On the contrary, her condition is weakening. I have used spells to investigate multiple times but found nothing. Our Retroflex Alpha letter 1D40D, letter 20F, letter 16D2, EHachek letter 1D61A. Li Xuanxuan was slightly startled and responded, "I will go down and see. I will come as well." Li Xuanfeng's words made Li Qinglao ecstatic. This elder's reputation for knowledge and experience far exceeded anyone else's in the family. Overjoyed, he quickly led them out. As Li Xuanfeng stepped forward, he turned to Li Xuanxuan and commented, "The descendants of the central branch always seem to possess a rare steadiness and calm." Li Xuanxuan nodded quietly in agreement as they stepped out of the grand formation. However, Li Xuanfeng suddenly stopped, his eyes narrowing as his expression turned stern. He reached both hands behind his back, where an exaggerated golden longbow appeared, its form radiant and formidable. Li Xuanxuan sensed something amiss and looked up at the sky. The heavy clouds over Moongaze Lake had begun to disperse. The rain that had fallen steadily for half a year gradually ceased. The thick clouds vanished and the sun broke through, illuminating the land. Though a faint drizzle remained, sunlight now shone down brightly. A dazzling glow began rising from the sky, filling it with brilliance. Though the rain still poured, its presence seemed otherworldly. Li Xuanfeng's eyes glowed with golden light as his perception technique activated. Through his vision, near the foot of Mount Lijing, a golden yellow cloud almost white began to rise. It radiated brightly, perfectly circular like a canopy, hanging suspended in midair. Li Xuanfeng took 2 steps and descended into the mountain. Li Xuanxuan and Li Qinglao followed closely behind. As they entered, Li Xuanfeng observed the faint wisp of cloud rising from the hall and said in a low voice, "Activate the formation first." Li Xuanxuan formed seals and cast the spell. Brilliant white light rose from the mountain, forming a barrier-like screen that sealed off the area. The 2 elders stepped inside. The courtyard, previously neat with stone tables and chairs, was now overwhelmed with white. Large and small white cicadas covered the ground, piled on top of one another, leaving no place to step. Their sharp cries pierced the air. Several maids lay collapsed on the ground as the white cicadas crawled through their clothing, flapping their wings and attempting to take flight. Li Qinglao was visibly shaken. Li Xuanfeng, however, stepped forward calmly and caught one of the white cicadas. As soon as it landed in his hand, it turned into gold-white smoke and vanished. He stepped forward again and the faint rustling sound ceased entirely. The scene before them disappeared without a trace, leaving only the unconscious maids on the ground. Li Qinglao rushed inside, while Li Xuanxuan asked in a low voice, "Is this an anomaly?" "Indeed." Li Xuanfeng responded and entered the inner chamber with a mix of worry and relief on his face. The 2 elders had just crossed the threshold when they heard a child's innocent laughter. Inside, the room was in complete disarray. Furniture lay overturned and the scene was chaotic. A creature, neither tiger nor wolf, lay in the center. It had 2 jade-like white horns on its head and carried a damp infant gently in its mouth. Li Qinglao kneeled down immediately, removing the white robe draped over his shoulders and spreading it beneath the creature, fearful that it might drop the child. Crack. Chapter 623, White Cicada Scaled Beast II. The sound of shattering glass rang out just as Li Xuanfeng entered. The white robe floated to the ground and the beast vanished entirely, leaving only the infant, now cradled in Li Qinglao's arms. Li Xuanxuan hurried forward, unable to contain himself. Li Qinglao stared blankly at the child in his arms, his hands trembling. When Li Xuanxuan looked closer, he met a pair of golden, amber-like eyes. Within the infant's gaze, golden rings nested inside one another, deep and dark, emanating a chilling and regal aura that sent shivers through their hearts. Gasp! The 2 of them gasped simultaneously. Meanwhile, Li Xuanfeng's expression darkened as he gripped the longbow behind him. The bowstring vibrated violently, letting out sharp, piercing sounds as he growled, "I am Li Xuanfeng. May I ask which senior has chosen to entrust themselves to my descendant?" His words reverberated through the room, shaking the very cups and plates until they trembled as though they might shatter under the pressure. Yet the infant only pursed its lips without answering. After waiting briefly, Li Xuanfeng turned to signal for the others to retreat. He stepped forward, meeting the child's clear, innocent gaze. After a moment of hesitation, he said in a low voice, "Qingliao, take him to Mount Qingdu." After all, it was his own child. Li Qingliao quickly wrapped the baby in the white robe, worry evident on his face as he glanced toward his weak wife on the bed. Li Xuanxuan noticed his gaze and understood immediately, saying, "I will take care of things here." The two of them flew off together. Li Xuanfeng remained vigilant throughout the journey, his thoughts racing. If the baby were a Buddhist cultivator, they wouldn't look like this. They must be a Taoist cultivator, at least of the Purple Mansion realm. It couldn't possibly be a Golden Core realm. Li Xuanfeng, being far more experienced, had heard of such cases where souls took over others' bodies during reincarnation. Usually they disguised themselves, mastered techniques, consumed resources, and then left without a trace. This made him deeply concerned. Li Xuanfeng had a sudden flash of inspiration. Reincarnated souls would have a distinct spirit from a newborn. A sweep of the immortal mirror would reveal their nature, any hidden tricks, and the thread of fate tied to them. When they landed, Li Xuanfeng instructed Li Qingliao to wait outside the ancestral hall. He strode inside and respectfully invoked, "I, Xuanfeng of the Li family, humbly request profound light to patrol the unseen, pierce through the mysteries, perceive the hidden truth, and illuminate all directions, capturing spirits and discerning the divine." A clear light emerged before him, and the pale blue immortal mirror descended from the great void, hovering in front of him. Li Xuanfeng focused his spiritual sense and swept over the baby cradled outside. The baby's spiritual platform appeared pristine, no enchanted items, no seals, pure and new, without any signs of declining spirit. While the child's body brimmed with spiritual energy, it showed no traces of being possessed or reincarnated. Li Xuanfeng checked thoroughly several times, finally sighing in relief. He returned the immortal mirror to the void, waited for the light to fade, then stepped out of the hall with a faint smile. Li Qingliao had been anxiously waiting all this time, closely observing the golden, amber-like eyes of the child. No matter how he looked, there were no signs of the child harboring some ancient demon. When Li Xuanfeng strode out confidently, laughing heartily, Li Qingliao hurried forward. Li Xuanfeng, still smiling, took the baby into his arms and after looking him over carefully, exclaimed with satisfaction, "This is our family's auspicious child." Hearing this, Li Qingliao finally relaxed and chuckled awkwardly. Li Xuanfeng stroked his beard and waved a hand, "Go Qingliao, call everyone over." Yes, yes. Li Qingliao reluctantly handed the baby over and hurried off. Li Xuanfeng continued to examine the child closely, growing more pleased the longer he looked. The baby didn't cry or fuss but instead stared back at him with those golden eyes. As he sat at the head seat, holding the child, he thought to himself, white cicadas filling the courtyard, a scaled beast bearing a child with jade-like horns. This is a sign of fate. He studied the baby again, noting the domineering gleam in their golden eyes, and smiled. This child was born to cultivate Bright Yang, a proper descendant of the Wei Li line. Before long, figures descended hastily into the courtyard. Li Xuanxuan entered first, looking puzzled. Li Xuanfeng waved him off lightly. "Nothing to worry about. He is an auspicious child." Li Xuanfeng handed the baby over. Li Xuanxuan inspected the child closely, his aged eyes glistening with tears. After a few moments, the hall filled with people, and Li Xuanfeng finally spoke softly. "This child may carry a thread of fate." Everyone exchanged glances of joy. Suddenly, a clear and bright voice came from the corner. "I see." Li Xuanfeng raised an eyebrow and turned to look. Li Yuexiang's eyes were bright with realization, and her mind worked quickly. Mimicking her mother's calm demeanor perfectly, she explained, "Do the elders still remember the incident with Su Zhao?" When these words fell, Li Xuanfeng's eyes narrowed slightly and he said coldly, "If I had been at home then, something like this could never have caused such a commotion." Li Qingliao and the others, who had experienced the incident firsthand, still seemed to have lingering fears. Li Qingliao laughed and said, "Now that our family has an auspicious child of its own." Oh, as he spoke, a look of sudden realization flashed across his face, as though he had already guessed what Li Yuexiang intended to say. Li Yuexiang softly explained, "At that time after killing that person, elder brother mentioned something, that Su Zhao's influence on Qingliao was limited. If not for this, he would have left much earlier, and we might never have noticed anything unusual." Li Xuanfeng frowned slightly and murmured, "Are you saying that because Qingliao was destined to be this child's father, that he had an innate ability to resist it?" The crowd fell silent, mulling over this idea in disbelief. Li Xunfeng shook his head and said, "It is hard to say. For now it is merely a guess, if fate truly possesses such a power." He left the rest of the sentence unfinished, but for once he smiled as he gazed at the child in his arms. Sweeping his eyes over everyone present, he declared, "Seeing this child, I feel much at ease. I can now return to the southern border without worry." The atmosphere among the crowd, which had been heavy for months, lightened noticeably. Everyone seemed genuinely happy for once. Li Ziming in particular looked the child over again and again, his entire body relaxing, as though a heavy burden had finally been lifted from his shoulders. Li Ziming held the child and met their gaze. Suddenly he felt the radiant origin pass within him stir violently. Unable to suppress his amazement, he said, "This truly is a child destined for bright yang cultivation." Li Xunfeng nodded, then gestured for Li Qinglio to step forward and asked with a smile, "Have you prepared a name for him?" Li Qinglio had previously considered naming the child Li Zhaoan, but at that moment he felt the name was somewhat lacking. Bowing respectfully, he said, "I ask the elders to bestow a name." Li Xunfeng pondered for a moment before speaking softly, "How about Wei? It matches perfectly." Li Zhaowei, Chapter 624, Rainbow Mist Eye. Holding the child in his arms, Li Xuanxuan looked down at him while Li Xunfeng pondered for a moment and spoke, "The matter of Green Pine Temple is complex, tangled with conflicting interests. Whether this child bears a thread of fate or not, the talents scattered across Jiangnan were almost entirely swept up in one fell swoop. Let this serve as a lesson for our family to remain vigilant." He briefly explained the events surrounding Green Pine Temple and continued, "When a Golden Core Realm cultivator reincarnates, Jiangnan produces numerous prodigies, all somewhat bearing a thread of fate. Several immortal sects have secretly observed this and guided these individuals to Green Pine Temple for their own use and consumption." Li Xuanfeng explained, "To truly discern the fate-bearer, even Purple Mansion Realm cultivators struggle. The ones who arrived at Green Pine Temple were mostly wandering geniuses, already marked by thread of fate, which made them easier for the immortal sects to notice." He scanned the room and added, "But what about those prodigies who fell into the clans and the direct lineages of immortal sects? Surely some exist. Even if not as extreme as someone like Tu Longjian, they are still exceptional talents. Those families understand the stakes and have hidden their prodigies well." Li Xuanfeng noted, "After all, if rogue cultivators succeed too easily, it raises suspicions. But for the children of clans and immortal sects, it is natural for them to advance smoothly through Qi Cultivation Realm and Foundation Establishment Realm. Who could call that abnormal?" Finally, Li Xuanfeng's voice softened. "By the time this child grows up, our family will likely control Moongaze Lake and rival prestigious clans like the Yuan or Han families. With connections to several Purple Mansion Realm cultivators, claiming bright Yang bloodline status will not expose us to undue covetousness, but be wary of Buddhist cultivators." Once he said this, everyone nodded. After all, fate was an unseen and untouchable force. Even if some anomaly in a grotto heaven occurred, the family would receive news and understand the inside story, ensuring they wouldn't unwittingly send someone into danger. In contrast, the obvious bright Yang Weili bloodline was highly coveted by Buddhist cultivators. However, the high-ranking Buddhist cultivators couldn't enter their territory easily. Compared to the greed of Purple Mansion Realm cultivators, their danger was much less pressing. Seeing that everyone had taken his words to heart, Li Xuanfeng nodded and said, "Between two evils, choose the lesser. Regardless of whether this child bears a thread of fate, his identity as a child of the Weili bloodline remains. He will be the young master of the Li family." Indeed. As soon as this was settled, Li Ziming lifted his sleeve and retrieved a small jade bottle, saying, "Back in the Eastern Fire Grotto Heaven, Brother Zhai acquired a few alchemy recipes. One of them mentioned the 3 aspects breaking realm pill, whose refined profound pill greatly aids in breaking through the Foundation Establishment realm. I have studied it for several years and finally succeeded in refining one." He opened the bottle to reveal a perfectly round crimson pill that glowed with a gem-like luster. The moment the bottle was uncorked, a pure fragrance rushed out, refreshing the mind and calming the spirit. Li Ziming closed the bottle carefully and offered, "This pill will be of immense use in breaking through the Foundation Establishment realm. Granduncle, since you are heading to the southern border, why not take one with you?" Li Xuanfeng paused slightly before nodding in acknowledgement. To refine a pill that aids in breaking through Foundation Establishment realm, even the Azure Pond sect has only a handful of alchemists who can manage it. Your skill in alchemy is truly commendable. However, I have my own arrangements for the southern border. Leave it here for family use." His words were decisive and firm, carrying undeniable authority. Seeing this, Li Ziming had no choice but to stow the bottle away. Li Xuanfeng thought for a moment, then reached into his robe and retrieved 3 arrow shafts. The arrows were pitch black, about the length of a forearm, with no arrowheads. 4 golden feathers adorned their ends, and upon closer inspection, faint runes seemed to flicker along the shafts. Handing the arrows to his elder brother, Li Xuanxuan, Li Xuanfeng instructed solemnly, "Keep these 3 arrows here. If anything urgent arises, snap one in half. I will sense it immediately and should be able to reach the family within 2 or 3 days." Such warning artifacts were not uncommon, but they were difficult to preserve for long. Even their family's life jade used to signify life or death needed to be worn close to the body and replaced yearly. Li Xuanxuan nodded and asked, "How long will they last?" Li Xuanfeng explained, "I crafted these during my leisure time over the past few months. Normal spiritual power or mana would not last long, so I condensed them using astral gold. They should remain effective for up to 5 years. By then, I will send back replacements." In truth, Taoist Master Yuan Su had warned him not to visit home too frequently. Li Xuanfeng, however, kept this to himself, thinking, if I told my elder brother what Yuan Su said, he would surely refuse to use the arrows out of concern for burdening me. That could delay critical matters. Li Xuanxuan clicked his tongue in admiration and carefully stored the 3 arrows. Li Xuanfeng glanced at the sky, calculated with his fingers, and said with some regret, "The time to leave is near. I must be on my way." He stepped out into the courtyard, pulling a small jade boat from his belt. Tossing it into the air, he turned back to remind them, "If anything arises at home, send me a letter. Things are much more convenient now compared to before." The group nodded, watching the jade-green spirit boat disappear into the radiant sunset. The boat, borrowed from Ning Wan, was incredibly fast and vanished in the blink of an eye. In no time, only the sky remained, adorned with golden clouds, crimson-orange sunlight, and dazzling radiance that stretched across the heavens. In his swaddling clothes, Li Xiaowei fixed his gaze on the setting sun, his amber-gold eyes reflecting its golden-red brilliance. The harmony between his gaze and the sun's hues was breathtaking and otherworldly. Letter 1E5F, Letter 1D63C, New Letter 1D664E Circumflex section. After seeing Li Xuanfeng off, the crowd gradually dispersed. Li Qingliao smiled as he carried the child back to his courtyard. His wife, Madame Hu, lay sound asleep. Although she was a qi cultivator, the birth of the child had drained her completely, leaving her physically and spiritually exhausted. She had taken some elixirs and was recuperating in their chambers. His father, Li Zicheng, followed him into the courtyard, his face beaming with joy. He stroked his beard and couldn't take his eyes off the child in Li Qingliao's arms. Shutting the door behind them, Li Zicheng smiled as he looked at the baby repeatedly before sighing softly. If only your great-grandfather were still alive, perhaps he could finally find peace. Great-grandfather Li Yuanian was one of the rare mortals within the family's direct bloodline. His life had been one of hardship and instability, and even his death brought little comfort. Although Li Zicheng eventually ascended to the position of family head, he could never let go of his father's suffering. Li Qingliao gently consoled him. "It is all in the past now. Let us look forward to the future." Azure Pond sect. Snow had piled up thickly in the forests of Kingsui Peak. The pavilions were silent and empty. A woman draped in Taoist robes sat on a bamboo platform, resting her chin in her hands. Her features were somewhat ordinary, but the luxurious Dharma robe she wore added a touch of elegance to her appearance. The cultivation aura around her lent her a refined and ethereal air. This woman was Yang Xiaor, and whenever she emerged from seclusion, she would sit here and look down. From this vantage point, she could see the colorful rainbow light rising from the cave dwelling on the mountainside. Her Tao companion, Li Zijai, was undergoing Foundation Establishment Realm breakthrough within. The radiant light floated upward above the cave and alternated between 6 vibrant colors before turning into a rainbow-colored mist that fell gently to the ground. This was the mystical 6-colored rainbow mist, which she had specially borrowed for this occasion. Chapter 625, Rainbow Mist, II. The Foundation Establishment Realm was a life-or-death trial for countless cultivators. Over time, rumors had spread about miraculous artifacts that could bolster success. Among these, the belief that materials related to their respective immortal foundation could secure breakthroughs was the most widespread. Although the Azure Pond sect had long since disproved this myth through rigorous testing, Yang Xiaor still held on to the idea that it's better to believe than not. The 6-colored rainbow mist happened to resonate with her husband's immortal foundation, so she set up a formation to confine it outside his cave, hoping to improve his chances of success. Yang Xiaor stared at the light for a while, silently praying in her heart. In reality, she needn't have been so worried. Li Zijai possessed exceptional natural talent, with a deep understanding of spells and scripture. He had also chosen an auspicious time to attempt his breakthrough, and had the additional support of the essence-gathering pill and profound cluster pill that she had procured from her family. The likelihood of failure was very slim. Still, since it concerned her beloved, Yang Xiaor couldn't help but be anxious, waiting patiently on the platform. Beneath her, the sound of tinkling bells echoed softly as a middle-aged man ascended the platform. He had an unremarkable face and a somewhat earnest demeanor. Cupping his fist respectfully, he said, "Junior sister, I must return to the family for a while." This man was Yuan Chengzhou, a senior disciple and member of the Yuan family. He was a late-stage qi cultivator, but today his face bore visible worry and hesitation. Their master, Yuan Tuan, had left for the Eastern Sea market and hadn't returned for several years. Being a member of the Yang family, Yang Xiaor was well aware of the situation, perhaps even more so than Yuan Chengzhou himself. She reassured him softly, "Worry not. Your esteemed clan still has 6 Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators. No matter what, they will hold on." Yuan Chengzhou shook his head and said softly, "If the 6 ancestors could truly work together, it would not be a problem." But Yuan Chengzhou continued, "With our master still missing at the Eastern Sea and no steady hand to preside over the family, everyone covets those few treasures, turning the situation quite ugly." This was the Yuan family's internal conflict. Yang Xiaor remained silent. Such disputes were not uncommon. When an ancestor fell, the resulting chaos often spread like ripples in water. The Yuan family's predicament was, in fact, relatively mild. Yuan Chengzhou, who had spent most of his life cultivating on the mountain, knew little of such matters. Just hearing rumors of the unrest at home left him anxious. Pacing restlessly, he vented his frustration. What is the point of fighting over this? Why bother? If Chengdun ascends, so be it. With someone of his abilities, how could he remain stuck running errands at the foot of the mountain? Those few treasures are indeed wondrous, but could they not be shared in rotation? What is the point of all this struggle? Seeing his agitation, Yang Xiaor realized he might suffer when returning home. She reminded him gently, the struggle is not over positions alone. Behind it are vested interests, factional power, and even the laws that govern family hierarchies. Do not underestimate it, otherwise you will end up like the Jiang family of Jade Lake. Yuan Chengzhou hesitated, then nodded in understanding. Yang Xiaor, still deep in thought, asked, "When your elder failed to break through to the Purple Mansion realm, it triggered rainfall across 4 prefectures, lasting for months. The phenomenon was astonishing. It seems he was only one step away from success." Yuan Chengzhou sighed. If a breakthrough succeeded, it would bring prestige to the family and joy to the sect, with congratulations pouring in from all directions. Yet failure meant a catastrophic loss of vital qi and prestige, leaving the family to suffer in silence, a stark and bitter contrast. Yang Xiaor dropped her gaze and murmured, "My family is no different. Our ancestor has been in seclusion attempting a breakthrough for decades. We wait in anticipation for a sign of success, yet quietly fear what might come instead." At this point, both of them suddenly looked up, sensing something. From the east, a vibrant rainbow light streaked across the sky, descending upon the mountain. In an instant, misty spiritual fog rose and iridescent clouds filled the air. "Senior brother has done it," Yuan Chengzhou exclaimed joyfully. Yang Xiaor, unable to contain her excitement, leaped into the air, soaring down toward the light. Sure enough, the door to the cave dwelling had opened, and from within emerged a young man clad in a radiant feathered robe. His features were refined and noble, his demeanor graceful and commanding. His broad shoulders and composed manner exuded an air of confidence and elegance. A faint smile played on his lips as he stepped forward and drew Yang Xiaor into his arms. Yang Xiaor was stunned. The transformation in her husband's aura after his breakthrough was remarkable. Her cheeks flushed as she stammered, "This universal dawn mist has refined your temperament. You seem even more regal now." Li Zijai swept his spiritual sense across himself and indeed noticed that his appearance had become more refined and dignified. However, he didn't think much of it. With a casual grasp, he captured the 6-colored rainbow mist and studied it closely. A fine spirit item. It can be forged into a Dharma artifact. With Yang Xiaor at his side, he ascended to the mountain peak just as Yuan Chengzhou approached them. "Congratulations, senior brother." Yuan Chengzhou offered his heartfelt congratulations, the worries on his face finally lifting. Not wanting to disturb the couple, he soon departed. Li Zijai watched him leave with a smile before turning to Yang Xiaor. He led her back into the cave dwelling and embraced her gently, his voice soft and warm. "How have you been lately?" Yang Xiaor, cheeks still tinged pink, responded with a shy hum. Her excitement overflowed, and tears of joy glimmered in her eyes as she smiled. Li Zijai kissed her forehead before letting her go. Yang Xiaor's gaze softened further as she looked at him, her eyes brimming with tenderness, refusing to look away. The woman naturally saw her beloved as handsome. She leaned against him like a cat, listening as Li Zijai said, "This universal dawn mist excels at stealth techniques, rainbow gathering, and spell casting. Once I ride its light, I can move faster than most cultivators of the same. When casting spells, my speed will be even more remarkable. What is rarer is that it can condense rainbow mist to confuse enemies, strengthen a mountain or land, and nurture spiritual qi." Yang Xiaor smiled and said, "It is truly an excellent immortal foundation for one who holds a domain." Li Zijai paused, then added, "My breakthrough went smoothly enough. It has been years in the blink of an eye, and I do not know how things are at home. Now that I have entered the Foundation Establishment realm, I should hurry back for a visit. I am sure my father will be delighted." A look of eager expectation appeared on his face. Yang Xiao understood his feelings, though she knew nothing of what had happened in the grotto heaven. Just as she was about to share some happy news, an urgent knock echoed at the stone door. Li Zijai stepped forward to open it, his face showing slight confusion. Standing at the door, Yuan Chengzhou lowered his head and said quietly, "Senior brother, I heard some news from outside. Yu Muxian is dead." Li Zijai froze, momentarily unable to rejoice at the news. Seeing his junior brother's somber expression, he recalled his past discussions with his younger brother, Li Zijian. In an instant, his heart sank and he furrowed his brows, asking, "Who killed him?" Yuan Chengzhou replied, "He and your honored father perished together." Li Zijai's face turned pale and he staggered back 2 steps. Yang Xiao hurriedly reached out to steady him. The three stood in silence for several moments, the stillness broken only when Yang Xiao realized her face had become damp. Li Zijai's tears trickled down his neck and fell onto his feathered robe. He pressed his lips together, forcing himself to say, "Thank you for telling me, junior brother." He turned back to glance at the cave dwelling. When he faced forward again, his tears had vanished and his expression had steadied. Locking the formation over the cave, Li Zijai spoke softly, "I will go to the main peak to request leave for some matters and return home for the morning." Yuan Chengzhou added in a low voice, "I also need to return home. Why not travel together?" Chapter 626, The Green Pine Affair concluded. The Eastern Sea. The fierce battle on Green Pine Island had raged on for a long time. With the grotto heaven finally leaving the mortal realm, the rogue cultivators dispersed like a swarm of bees. The spiritual energy, which had shone as bright as the sun, gradually began to wane, returning to the normal state of an average grotto heaven. Meanwhile, in the boundless vastness of the great void, streams of radiant light rose and wove together. The Green Pine Temple's grotto heaven had completely detached from the mortal world, vanishing into the blackness of the void. It transformed into waves of multicolored light before sinking into the infinite emptiness. The multicolored lights of divine abilities flowed across the great void, with several figures standing silently in a circle, staring at the 2 jade boxes suspended at the center. Not a single person spoke. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense until a northern figure broke the silence with a soft voice. The jade boxes from Hangzhou Dao Gate and Mount Changhui were empty from the start. As for the missing 2, they belonged to Azure Pond Sect and Purple Smoke Gate. Nearby, the multicolored light condensed into an azure-gray glow. Yuan Su stood in the great void and sneered coldly, a bunch of fools squabbling over nothing. Hangzhou Dao likely knew their box was empty all along otherwise. Why would they refrain from sending even a single Purple Mansion Realm cultivator? The remaining 2 jade boxes belonged to Sword Gate and Great Ziyuqi Temple, neither of which are easy to deal with. You had better settle this carefully. Yuan Su's reputation was not stellar, and his temperament was notorious. Knowing he was near the end of his lifespan, he had little regard for social etiquette. Though his words provoked a few snorts of derision from the Purple Mansion Realm cultivators, no one openly rebuked him. Not one of the assembled Purple Mansion Realm cultivators brought up the aftermath of the so-called Fate Bearers, as if some unspoken agreement had been reached beforehand. Only a sword-wielding cultivator spoke up, "I only wish to retrieve the jade box that rightfully belongs to me." His statement was immediately met with scornful interruption. "You Sword Gate folks take all the benefits. What are the rest of us supposed to be here for? To watch?" The great void fell silent once more until a black-robed man finally broke the stillness. "My Ziyuqi Temple says the same." The spiritual senses of the Purple Mansion Realm cultivators collided, a hushed exchange seemingly taking place. Yuan Su, meanwhile, lowered his head, silently observing the jade boxes. He seemed to be waiting for something, his eyes fixed on the boxes with meticulous scrutiny. Sure enough, from the depths of the void, a figure began to emerge. The man in the white robe had a sword at his waist, housed in a wooden scabbard with a hilt made of reddish-brown pine wood. He strolled forward leisurely, his movements unhurried yet steady, and stopped before the 2 jade boxes. His features appeared indistinct, and each step he took rippled with waves of white light beneath his feet, as if he were walking on water. Shangyuan. The collective murmurs echoed among the group of Purple Mansion Realm cultivators. All activity ceased as the 11 Purple Mansion Realm cultivators fixed their attention on him. The myriad divine abilities and perception techniques they had been wielding wove across the great void, scanning and measuring the white-robed figure as if they were trying to pierce through his robes to see what lay beneath. They showed no signs of surprise. Instead, they seized every second to carefully measure the figure before them with their divine abilities. The earlier disputes and murmurs seemed to vanish as if they had never taken place. It was clear that these 11 Purple Mansion Realm cultivators had all been waiting for this one person. Taoist Master Shangyun reached out and picked up one of the jade boxes. The jade boxes, fought over so intensely moments before, now seemed as ordinary as wooden chests in his hands. Without hesitation, he casually flicked open the box, revealing a short, blade-like shard. He retrieved the shard and appeared unimpressed. With a nonchalant flick of his fingers, he sent the shard flying toward the swordsman who had been standing off to the side. "Keep it safe," Shang Yuan said lightly. The Sword Gate's Taoist master cupped his fist repeatedly in gratitude, his tone deeply respectful. "Senior, when do you plan to make your breakthrough? Have you decided on the method yet?" Taoist master Shang Yuan seemed to share some familiarity with him. Ignoring the rest of the Purple Mansion realm cultivators present, he chuckled and said, "Jade True follows the archaic methods. I take neither yin and yang nor the 5 elements, but rather affirm the metallic essence through the interplay of void and reality." He turned his gaze to the Taoist masters from the great Ziyuqi temple nearby and said softly, "Hangzhou and Ziyuqi both follow archaic methods. You might as well come and observe it would bring you much benefit." As he spoke, he picked up the other jade box and tossed it to the Taoist master without waiting for his thanks. With that, he vanished into the void. The cultivators from Sword Gate and the great Ziyuqi temple, having received such treasures, were elated beyond measure. They had no intention of lingering in the great void any longer. With their goals achieved, they disappeared swiftly and completely from sight. The other 9 Purple Mansion realm cultivators stood silent, helplessly watching him distribute the 2 jade boxes as if by divine right. No one dared to object. Only the one in the center sighed softly and, with a gentle wave of his hand, summoned a dazzling array of treasures into the air. There were numerous items on display at the very least. Each one was a top-grade treasure of the Foundation Establishment realm. Scattered among them were some ancient artifacts from the Grotto Heaven. That Purple Mansion realm cultivator declared, 26 Dharma artifacts, 2 Purple Mansion realm spirit artifacts, 6 transmission records, 9 clues to relics and various long-lost items. Take your pick. If any item's value exceeds your selection, leave something in return as compensation. He raised an eyebrow and pulled from the pile a shimmering, water-like crystal block. Its surface rippled with waves and sparkled with points of starlight. The Taoist master glanced at it and spoke lightly. "Does anyone want this one? Among the Foundation Establishment realm treasures, it is considered top grade. It is called the Celestial Screen of Azure Patterns. The journey from Mount Azure Pond to Moongaze Lake spanned across half of Yue State. Li Zijai changed into white robes and the group rode the wind as they departed. Wishing to avoid being seen, they flew high above the clouds. This area had sparse spiritual energy, making wind riding difficult. For this reason, few ventured here. However, all of them hailed from immortal sects, and riding the wind in such conditions posed no challenge to them. Silently, they traveled amidst the rising glow of dawn. The clouds displayed a kaleidoscope of colors. Within the vibrant glow, Li Zijai seemed perfectly at ease, gliding through the sky in silence. Days passed in flight, during which the 2 individuals behind him racked their brains, searching for something to say that might distract him. Just then, a few feathered beasts descended from the high heavens. They resembled beautifully crafted fish, their colors dazzling. With 2 wings extending from beneath their ribs, their heads were round, their snouts flat, and their orange feathered wings flapped nimbly in the air, giving them an agile appearance. Such a rare sight. We've encountered some dawn rayfish. The dawn rayfish paused momentarily within Li Zijai's rainbow-colored light before quickly disappearing into the clouds. Glancing at them, Li Zijai remarked, "When the waters rise, dawn rayfish emerge. This is likely caused by rain clouds from some clan ancestor, forcing these spirit beasts to fly so low that we happen to see them." Dawn rayfish were fond of water and rainbows. Since Li Zijai followed the Dawn Dao lineage, he was naturally familiar with such creatures. If the 2 others hadn't been present, the fish would likely have lingered to absorb more of his rainbow light rather than leaving so swiftly. "They are probably coming from the northern sea," he added, "heading to the eastern and southern seas." Yang Zio responded, lamenting, "These days, such spirit beasts are becoming scarce. Heaven and earth's upheavals have destroyed who knows how many things." The hardest hit were certainly heavenly thunder and geomagnetic forces, Yuan Chengzhou interjected. "It has been millennia since either has been seen. Not only has heavenly thunder vanished, but even the profound peak can barely be considered Titan Earth anymore, degraded into what we now call Fool's Mountain Chase." Chapter 627, The Green Pine Affair concluded. Aye. Li Zijai sighed silently at their words, understanding their intent to console him. Speaking softly, he said, "Do you know why the dawn rayfish are drawn to rainbows?" The 2 were taken aback, both delighted that Li Zijai had finally spoken and puzzled by his sudden words. They asked a question in return, to which Li Zijai replied, "Feathered beasts belong to the category of pristine and radiance, such as feathered serpents and loon birds. Scaled beasts, on the other hand, follow convergence and merging, including creatures like demonic dragons and scaled crows." The dawn rayfish, with its feathered wings and scaly body, exists between the 2 categories. Between these 2 categories, water disperses and light converges, harmonizing and complementing one another. That is what forms rainbows. Li Zijai spoke softly. The last predecessor to cultivate the dawn dew-gathering technique was Linguzia. His mount was the venomous eagle, another half-scaled, half-feathered demonic creature. Yuan Chengzhou sighed and said, "When I was young and mischievous, I did not value studying. Now all I can do is admire you, senior brother. It seems these 5 categories feathered, scaled, furry, bear, and winged all have their own connections to Dao lineage. The depth of knowledge here is truly boundless." The group flew on for a while, and soon Yuan family's mushroom forest plain came into view. Yuan Chengzhou's expression darkened, and with a word of farewell, he descended. With Moongaze Lake now so close, Li Zijai's mood sank once more. Mount Qingdu. For more than a year, the northern prefectures of Yue State had seen no more torrential downpours, but steady drizzles persisted. Paddies, millet, and beans withered in the fields, deprived of sunlight, leaving nothing to harvest. Fortunately, the Li family had enjoyed abundant harvests in prior years and maintained ample reserves. Grain was distributed to households according to protocol. Though there were unavoidable instances of corruption and greed, the family's wealth and resources prevented any major crises. After all, the Li family had slain a disciple of Yuanwu Peak and still stood unharmed. Although Li Yuanjiao had perished, the incident only further demonstrated the family's deep foundation and formidable connections. These people, though unaware of the full details, didn't let that stop them from currying favor. Li Xuanfeng had vanished into the southern border, but the Li family at Moongaze Lake couldn't simply uproot and leave. As the news spread, the Li family estate became increasingly crowded with visitors. Li Yuexiang, clad in mourning attire, was known to be Li Yuanjiao's orphan. Anyone with a modicum of sense could guess she had inherited untold treasures. Coupled with her striking beauty, she became the object of desire for many families, who nearly trampled down the estate's threshold in their eagerness to secure her favor. "Go, send that letter back." Li Xuanxuan waved off the servant with visible irritation. These visitors rarely managed to disturb him directly, but even the Han family from Dongliu Island had sent people to inquire. The situation was gradually spiraling out of control, and Li Xuanxuan feared that if mishandled, several powerful families might be offended. He furrowed his brows and for once allowed a rare expression of annoyance to surface. In a low voice he muttered, "How ironic. Now the place is bustling with visitors." In life, Li Yuanjiao had not earned widespread renown. Yet the sheer number of mourners after his death seemed almost absurd, a cruel irony that only deepened the discomfort in Li Xuanxuan's heart. Just as he began to settle, a commotion erupted outside. Several people rushed in noisily, their hurried steps chaotic and their voices loud. One of them shouted, "Elder, the master has returned. The master has returned." Another person, trousers soaked and disheveled as if having just rushed in from the rain, called out, "Elder." People from Profound Peak Gate have arrived. With Li Zijin still in seclusion, Li Xuanxuan had temporarily taken charge of the mountain's affairs. The 2 disciples, who had been personally trained by him, were loyal but somewhat lacking in decorum. Sighing, he intercepted one of them and asked, "Which master?" "The master from the immortal sect." The disciple replied. Li Xuanxuan immediately stood and rushed outside. As expected, he saw several figures standing beyond the protective formation. The elderly man let out an ah of surprise and hurried to open the formation. Li Zijai, waiting outside, noticed a woman standing nearby in a flaxen-colored gown. Her features were characteristic of the Zhe region in northern Yue, her face round, her dark brows delicately arched, with a refined and sweet charm, yet her tightly pressed lips betrayed a hint of sorrow. "She seems to be wearing the robes of Profound Peak Gate," Li Zijai noted silently. The woman seemed to notice him as well. She called out, "Fellow Taoist, which immortal sect are you from?" Li Zijai and his wife disliked wearing Azure Pond sect robes, but the profound patterned feathered robe he wore clearly marked him as someone of extraordinary origin. Hearing the question, Li Zijai cupped his fist and replied, "Li Zijai of Kingsui." "Oh, I see." The woman's expression softened at once. She was about to speak when Li Xuanxuan hurried out, staring at Li Zijai for a moment before exclaiming, "Good. Grandfather has grown so old." Li Zijai thought with a pang of sorrow. He barely recognized the frail old man standing before him. However, with guests still present, Li Xuanxuan took charge. Pulling Li Zijai aside, he turned to the flaxen-robed woman and said, "So it is Taoist Tingyun. Please come inside the formation." Kong Tingyun nodded politely and returned the gesture, stepping gracefully onto the peak. Following custom, she burned paper, paid her respects, and quickly withdrew from the main hall. Li Zijai and the others waited for her outside. Li Yuanjiao had been deceased for quite some time. As cultivators, they refrained from adhering to excessive mortal rituals, accompanying Kong Tingyun as she exited. Kong Tingyun, careful not to stir up sorrow, avoided mentioning the past. Instead, she spoke softly. "Among the 6 jade boxes in the Green Pine Grotto Heaven, 2 have gone missing. Have any of you heard anything about them?" Seeing Li Xuanxuan shake his head, Kong Tingyun said, "According to the various Purple Mansion realm cultivators, these 6 jade boxes each had an intended owner. I have heard that a few of them have already gone missing or been emptied. My family's ancestor mentioned that some Taoist masters have been quite unhappy about the matter. Li Xuanxuan initially wanted to follow the conversation and ask how Taoist master Changxi had fared in this situation. However, considering Changxi's awkward position within the sect, it was likely he hadn't gained much. He decided to change the subject, replying, "When Taoist masters divide these treasures, it is inevitable there will be not enough to go around. Conflict is unavoidable." Kang Tingyan hesitated for a moment. It seemed as though she wanted to say something but swallowed her words, her expression darkening as she thought, "The ancestor truly has no sense of tact. Asking me to arrange for Li Xunfeng to meet Yuan Su at this time is so inconsiderate. Best to wait a little longer." Finally, she cupped her fist, her expression softening as she looked at Li Zijai and said gently, "Your father and I shared a good relationship during his lifetime. You are welcome to visit Profound Peak and spend time with us whenever you like." Kang Tingyan, unsure of Li Zijai's temperament, didn't dare to overpromise or commit to anything too specific. However, Li Zijai recognized the sincerity in her words and nodded politely in return. Without further delay, Kang Tingyan departed, riding the wind away. Only after her departure did Li Zijai turn back to Li Xuanxuan and remark, "It seems that senior truly had a close bond with father." Li Xuanxuan waved dismissively, as he himself didn't know the full extent of their relationship. Setting the topic aside, he carefully looked Li Zijai up and down before sighing, "You have also broken through to the Foundation establishment realm. All of you brothers are making remarkable progress. Now we are only waiting on Zijin. Zijin is in seclusion." Li Zijai froze, his tone growing anxious. Why did he not send a letter to inform us? Did he have the necessary pills prepared? After saying this, Li Zijai suddenly recalled that he had also been in seclusion himself. Even if Zijin had sent a letter, it wouldn't have reached him. Realizing this, he could only silently send his blessings in his heart. Li Xuanxuan, however, turned to Yang Xiaor, giving her a once-over. After studying her carefully, he nodded approvingly and said, "She is sensible and well-mannered." Yang Xiaor opened her mouth as if to speak but hesitated, a hint of anxiety showing on her face. The old man, noticing this, smiled faintly. Naturally understanding her concerns, he said softly, "I will take you both to see Huder." Chapter 628, A Cautionary Tale. Li Chenghui, now 11 or 12 years old, stood beside Li Yuexiang, holding her hand. He bowed respectfully. Li Zijai raised his gaze to look at them. One was his younger sister, whom he had never met before, and the other his son, whom he had not seen in years. Faces of the two were both unfamiliar and familiar, carrying a sense of distance. It was evident that neither of them felt very close to him. Yang Xiaor, however, was overjoyed. She embraced the bewildered Li Chenghui and began fussing over him with concern. Li Zijai, on the other hand, felt a pang of loss and stood there silently. Nearby, Li Xuanxuan watched him intently. For cultivators, a single seclusion could last several years, often causing them to miss many aspects of life. It was no wonder that so many children of clans became unruly, their personalities warped, spoiled, or unskilled. The Azure Pond sect's practice of isolating its disciples from worldly ties proved highly effective in severing emotional connections. Li Zijai remained quiet, sending his son, younger sister, and Yang Xiaor away to rest. Only then did he sit down and listen carefully as Li Xuanxuan shared the news from this year. After hearing every detail, he asked about the specifics regarding the events within the Grotto Heaven. With a surprised expression, he inquired, "Xiao Yongling and Tu Longjian were also involved in killing Yu Muxian. There is no word of this outside." Well, before Li Xuanxuan could respond, Li Zijai paused to think. He quickly pieced things together and nodded, saying, "The Xiao family offering assistance already indebts them to us. Naturally, this blame will fall upon our family. It is not something beneficial, so of course, the Xiao family would not publicly admit their involvement." "That is true," Li Xuanxuan agreed with a nod. Li Zijai lifted his head, his expression complex. Though his drooping gaze brimmed with sorrow, the corners of his lips curled upward ever so slightly. A mixture of grief and resignation filled his voice as he said, "Father and I once dreamed of unifying Moongaze Lake, but I never imagined it would come at the cost of his life. Now that Yu Muxian is dead, it is only a matter of time before Moongaze Lake falls into our hands." Li Xuanxuan immediately understood and responded, "There are still more than 10 years until the next rotation. It will take careful maneuvering until then." "Exactly," Li Zijai replied. 10 years is neither long nor short. It is just 2 cycles of seclusion for a cultivator. In the meantime, we must ensure that Yunwu Peak does not come back to recruit disciples." "Recruit disciples?" Li Xuanxuan chuckled and replied, "Do you know what the Yu family has become? Since Yu Mugao's death, the power consolidated under him from external cultivators, branch elders, and collateral lines has completely unraveled. Now any promising talent from their main line dies mysteriously before they can rise. How could they possibly recruit disciples?" Li Zijai, his face like a polished jade crown, lowered his gaze slightly. He didn't relax despite Li Xuanxuan's reassurance. Instead, his voice, gentle yet steady, echoed faintly, "Grandfather, you must not let your guard down. Father's life was defined by caution, and there is much to be learned from it." Li Xuanxuan's smile faded and he nodded solemnly. Li Zijai then spoke softly. "The Yu family splintered under Jiang's example. Let it serve as a cautionary tale." "I understand," Li Xuanxuan replied. He was fully aware of what Li Zijai meant, that dismantling Yu Muxian's network of connections was the best strategy. Breaking it apart would render them powerless, allowing the Li family to advance or retreat as needed, creating unparalleled advantages. With a quiet determination, Li Xuanxuan said, "I will take care of it immediately." Li Zijai quickly shifted topics and asked, "How are the younger generation of the family?" Li Xuanxuan nodded and replied, "The heir Zhao is of the bright Yang bloodline. He is only 2 years old, so his talents have yet to fully emerge, but his potential seems promising." Li Xuanxuan continued, "As for Qingliao, he has the steadiness and prudence of Yuanping. He manages household affairs with clarity and thoughtfulness. Though outwardly unremarkable, he is brilliant within. During the matter with Su Zhao years ago, he contributed greatly. He is an excellent child, though the family has been too peaceful in recent years to fully utilize his talents." Finally, he concluded, "Cheng Huai has decent aptitude and should have no problem reaching the foundation establishment realm. The two of them can serve as aides to Zhao Wei and help mold him into something exceptional, ensuring the family remains secure for the next century." "Zhao Wei." Li Zijai was surprised and said, "I should meet him, and where is Ziming, brother?" Before Li Zijai could finish speaking, a figure clad in a golden Taoist robe appeared at the door. The robe shimmered with alchemical fire qi, and the 8 trigrams were emblazoned on its back. The figure was none other than Li Ziming. In recent years, Li Ziming had focused primarily on alchemy and rarely entered seclusion. Yet, his exceptional natural talent allowed his cultivation to progress steadily, even as he refined pills. Li Zijai's eyes lit up upon seeing him and patted him on the shoulder, laughing heartily. "And where is Aunt?" "She has gone to the Eastern Sea," Li Mixing answered. When they were younger, Li Ziming often accompanied this elder brother to watch plays, and their bond had been close. Smiling absent-mindedly, he felt a wave of nostalgia as he realized that Li Zijai hadn't changed much from the brother he remembered. Li Zijai gestured for them to come closer, his demeanor turning a bit more serious. After a moment of hesitation, he began, "This time, I was only able to leave because I accepted an assignment. I am heading to Green Pine Island to serve as its guardian." He explained further, Green Pine Grotto Heaven, briefly in contact with the mortal world before separating again, had caused Green Pine Island to become a land of concentrated spiritual energy, even though no spirit creatures had been born from it since. Its abundant spiritual energy made it suitable for qi gathering and cultivation, effectively making it a minor blessed land. The immortal sects, ever opportunistic, split the island into sections and claimed territories for themselves. Li Zijai had been assigned to guard one of these areas and oversee qi gathering. Li Zijai said, "Since this is an official task assigned by the sect, time is tight. I need to report back immediately after completing it, but I will find time to return home in the future. While I am at it, I will head to the Eastern Sea to look for my master's whereabouts. There is no time to delay, so let me first discuss a few matters with you, grandfather, to prevent any issues." Li Xuanxuan nodded, understanding the urgency and prepared to listen intently. Li Zijai continued, "First, about the Yuan family. Although my master has disappeared in the Eastern Sea and there is infighting within the Yuan family, with their power base crumbling and showing signs of decline, they are far from finished. A centipede may die, but it does not stop wriggling. The family must avoid any impulsive actions against them. It would only bring harm to ourselves." Li Xuanxuan chuckled and shook his head, responding earnestly, "At the very least, our two families are allies. The Yuan clan has offered us assistance many times in the past, so such a thing is impossible. Good, if there is a chance we might even lend them a hand. True loyalty in times of hardship is remembered the most." Although reassured, Li Zijai couldn't help but add another cautionary note. Lowering his voice, he continued gravely, "What about the Yu family? This rain has been falling for 2 whole years now, which is far beyond the influence of someone at the Foundation establishment realm." Li Zijai speculated, "No matter how talented Yuan Licheng may have been, he is merely someone who failed to break through. This prolonged rainfall is excessive. Based on my observations, there is likely someone orchestrating it from behind the scenes." His expression grew tense as he added, "Furthermore, I encountered dawn rayfish on the way. These creatures descend during heavy rains and are usually linked to converging water or pristine water. However, as far as I recall, my master once mentioned that Yuan Licheng cultivated the water mansion system." Li Ziming was visibly startled and whispered, "Are you suggesting that someone in Azure Pond sect is deliberately using divine techniques to bring down this rain?" Li Zijai nodded and explained, "I have some theories derived from Taoist principles. It is a long story, but I will summarize." He led them to a desk where he drew a circle on the surface. As his rainbow-like chi flowed, the lines turned bright white. Chapter 629, A Cautionary Tale II. Li Zijai began, every region has its own spiritual energy profile. Currently, Yue State is under a profound balance atmosphere, which is inherently fragile. It was painstakingly adjusted by the master cultivator of Yue cultivating sect, using Kai Wei and Chu Yi as anchors, to create the perfect conditions for Yue cultivating sect's Shangyuan sword immortal to achieve their breakthrough. This profound balance atmosphere was already fragile, and with the influence of the Grotto Heaven and the converging Water Dragon clan, it is now teetering on the edge of collapse. If this spirit reign continues unchecked, it may completely erode the balance. Li Xuanxuan furrowed his brow and said, if that is the case, Yue cultivating sect will not sit idly by. I believe Yue cultivating sect has already sensed that something is amiss. Li Zijai nodded and continued, there are bound to be major events in the future. The family must act prudently, aligning its actions with the situation. Understood. Both Li Xuanxuan and his grandson nodded in agreement. Even Li Ziming, who was usually lighthearted, wore a rare look of seriousness. Seeing their understanding, Li Zijai said, the Eastern Sea's convergence of water and thunder is the perfect opportunity for Aunt to hold her position. Grandfather, could you prepare a map of Zongquan Island for me? I plan to visit it when I have time. Li Xuanxuan, of course, provided him with the map. With no reason to linger, Li Zijai discussed the matter carefully with his wife before turning back and saying, Xior, stay here and spend time with Huir. I will be on my way first. Li Xuanxuan quickly pulled him aside and used a sound-transmitting technique to say, find a Foundation Establishment Realm demonic beast, and do not forget to receive the talisman. Li Zijai nodded. Li Xuanxuan shook his head and said, it is not easy in the sect either. Jir is the most outstanding of your generation. If he had not gone to the sect, your younger brother would not have had to work so hard. Li Ziming paused, his expression turning to one of slight embarrassment. He sighed and said, Grandfather, when you say that, I can only feel ashamed. Li Xuanxuan waved a hand dismissively. The old man stroked his white beard, patting Li Ziming gently on the back and said softly, each of you brothers is doing your best. You. A nostalgic expression crossed his face as he lowered his voice and said, when I was young, my brothers and elders were either brilliant and sharp, steady and composed, or courageous and strong. When I was given the main seat, I always carried a deep sense of guilt in my heart. It was not until I grew older and experienced more of life that I realized it was not because I was weak or incapable. The old man paused for a moment before laughing and continuing. It was because they were too extraordinary. If you, Li Ziming, were in another family, there is no telling. You might have been one of the central figures. Li Ziming shook the golden sleeves of his robe and chuckled, shaking his head in response. He said, when I met Granduncle, I thought he was a man of unparalleled might. Armored in war gear, his gaze fierce like that of a tiger or wolf, an unparalleled and fearsome figure. I have never encountered anyone like him. Yet I heard people say he was still no match for the ancestor, who slew the Maha and subdued the Fei and Yu families. Whenever I think about it, I can hardly believe such people exist. In my lifetime, I wonder how long it will take to meet such figures again. Li Ziming reflected. Li Xuanxuan laughed heartily, a rare sense of boldness filling his voice as he declared, you may end up waiting an entire lifetime. Mount Lijing. Li Qinglio hurried out of the main hall after handling family affairs. By now, the sun was gradually setting. As head of the clan affairs courtyard, he didn't deal with much on a daily basis. For someone at the Qi cultivation realm, there was no need to spend years in seclusion. The matters he attended to could be resolved in moments, with a few notes and signatures already completing the day's work. Li Qinglio's natural aptitude was decent compared to others, but it fell far short when compared to the exceptional talents of the Zai and Yue generation. He wasn't far off from his father's abilities, with only a slim hope of reaching the Foundation Establishment realm. As such, he wasn't in a rush to cultivate. For Li Qinglio, cultivation wasn't a lifelong pursuit. It was merely a tool for governance. Instead of spending days in seclusion, he preferred teaching children or chatting with his wife. Upon entering his family estate, he immediately heard voices from the inner room. Walking in, he found his father, Li Zicheng, dressed in fine robes and seated at the writing desk. Across from him sat a little boy, barely 2 years old, carefully arranging several jade rods on the desk in front of him with great focus. Father, Li Qinglio greeted him. Li Zicheng smiled, waved him over, and pointed at the little boy. The child's features had not yet fully developed, his face round and soft, with eyes like amber gold. Hearing the movement, he looked up at Li Qinglio and called out softly, Dad. Li Qinglio nodded, watching as the boy arranged the jade rods into a neat row of 6 on the desk. Quietly observing, he then heard Li Zicheng speak in a low tone, saying, Your uncle returned briefly but left in a rush. I was in seclusion at the time and did not hear the news. Uncle Zijai. Li Qinglio suddenly realized something. Then he heard his father, Li Zicheng, ponder aloud. What he means is. There is no need to keep up appearances with the Yu family anymore. The sooner they are dismantled, the fewer complications there will be. Li Qinglao nodded slightly. The father and son exchanged a glance before Li Qinglao smiled and said, "Then let us dissolve them. Leave it to me." Li Zicheng held a teacup in his hand, gently placing it on the desk. He asked, "Do you have a way? Ideally, it should leave no trace." Li Qinglao sipped his tea and replied, "That is easy. These people are poorly informed. They likely would not even believe Yu Muxian is dead unless someone made it clear. And with a few clan elders sealing off the news, all we need to do is let the truth come to light." He called out, and soon a jade court guard came forward. Li Qinglao gave his instructions: fetch the 6-stone cloud plate from the treasury and summon Elder N. And Zhayan arrived swiftly. The elder, now more serene and gentle in his old age, cupped his fist and responded with great courtesy. Li Qinglao took the battered spirit artifact from the hands of a guard nearby and said softly, "Elder, I would like you to take some people to the Yu family. Tell them that the Yu family conspired against our ancestor in years past, and that Yu Muxian's death is merely karmic retribution. But since he was still considered a heroic figure, send this spirit artifact as a burial offering for his remains so they will not be left to scatter." He paused, worried that Zhayan might not fully understand his intent. Giving him a meaningful glance, he added in a low voice, "Make this move a grand one. The hooked serpent is still in the lake and has not gone into seclusion yet. Bring him along with you. With a Foundation Establishment Realm cultivator supporting you, there is no need to fear anything unexpected." And Zhayan nodded in appreciation, taking the spirit artifact before leading a large force of jade court guards to carry out the order. Li Qinglao then called another individual forward and instructed, "Tomorrow, ensure that those Yu family relatives on the eastern bank, those who have secretly allied with us, rise up in unison and sever all ties with the Yu family." Li Zicheng quietly nodded from the side, while little Li Xiaowei lifted his head to look at his father, his gaze full of affection. Li Qinglao summoned yet another person and commanded, when deploying the jade court guards, make the display as loud as possible. Let the people under Master Lu see everything clearly. The person he summoned was Du Yi, now an elderly man himself. Du Yi nodded quickly and departed. Li Qinglao spoke in a low voice. "That Master Lu who harmed Yu Mugo seems to have privately contacted our family several times. Yet we have kept our distance and have not responded. He is a clever man. If he gets wind of this, he will know how to act accordingly. In this way, even if anything happens later, if Yu Muxian's supporters were to lose their minds and come to cause trouble, no matter how hard they try to use soul-searching techniques, they will not be able to pin anything on us." He gently picked up Li Xiaowei, cradling the boy with a smile and saying, "This, my son, is what is called an open strategy." Li Xiaowei blinked his golden eyes and leaned against his father's chest, mumbling the two words softly to himself. Chapter 630, Return Once More. Milan Prefecture was the Yu family's ancestral stronghold and the most fertile area in all the mortal lands around Moongaze Lake. At its height, it supported a population of 560,000, but decades of decline had reduced that number to just 220,000. The land here was flat and rich, a vast and fertile plain. Yet with the loss of Yu Mugo's leadership, the mortal inhabitants had fallen into destitution, and most of the arable land and mineral resources had been seized by clan elders and external cultivators. And Zhayan rode the wind as he flew toward the prefecture. Though he was now an old man, a faint joy was unmistakable on his face. It wasn't hard to understand his feelings. His life had been a series of dramatic ups and downs, first rising to prominence by overthrowing the Jai family and being hailed as the father of a prodigy, only to see his clan exterminated and his son killed by Yu Mugo and Yu Xiaogui. Reduced to hiding among mortals, he had barely survived. In the end, he sought refuge with the Li family, experienced repeated breakthroughs in cultivation, reinvented himself, and even remarried and started a new family. Now, after all these years, he was returning to Yu family lands with a large force of cultivators at his back. 67 years had passed like a fleeting dream, and his eyes brimmed with tears. Jingaming, even if this was achieved by borrowing the strength of the Li family, it is still a real chance to repay this humiliation. "Give me a few more years, and I will repay every drop of blood debt in kind," he murmured to himself. "You always saw farther than I did." He thought back to his talented son, who had urged him to escape through the hidden tunnel and repeatedly told him to seek shelter with the Li family. At the time, Zhayan thought it was akin to walking into a trap, but over the years, he came to accept it and even be grateful. Milan Peak slowly came into view. Several Yu family cultivators flew up to intercept him but were stopped at the perimeter. Zhayan, his posture deliberately arrogant, strode confidently forward with his hands clasped behind his back, saying nothing as he stood before the grand formation. Glancing at the barrier, he smirked and said, "Well, who would have thought?" Zhayan was about to reply when a muffled groan suddenly echoed from within the formation, followed by a scream of disbelief. He stood stunned as the Yu family's main formation opened effortlessly before him. A man flew out from below, holding aloft an intricate formation plate in both hands. Bowing respectfully, he announced loudly, "I am from the Kai family of Mount Zai, and I welcome the arrival of the Immortal Clan. The great Yu family formation lies here, and the Grand Elder Yu Muley has already been executed by this humble servant." The Jade Court guards exchanged bewildered glances, and Injayan, equally stunned, said nothing as he descended. The Kai family member, still holding the formation plate with both hands, followed closely behind Injayan. The large party landed together, and the Jade Court guards, numbering 22 Chi cultivators, outnumbered the Yu family members standing on the peak. Before the assembled Yu family cultivators, Injayan retrieved the 6-stone cloud plate with a cold sniff. He declared, "The Yu family once conspired to harm the head of my clan. Now karma has come for Yu Muxian. Out of respect for him as a so-called hero, I present this spirit artifact to bury with his body, so his remains will not be scattered to the winds." At these words, Li Wushou, who stood behind him clad in black robes, rolled his eyes silently. Having worked with Injayan during lake mining surveys, Li Wushou knew him well and thought to himself, he definitely picked up that line from somewhere. There is no way he came up with that on his own. Still, Li Wushou played along. His expression darkened, and shadows darted ominously beneath his robes. The Foundation Establishment realm aura he released was so intense that the Yu family cultivators across from him all took an involuntary step back. The atmosphere was tense, with fear and dread palpable among the Yu family members. None of them dared to step forward to accept the battered 6-stone cloud plate. Their hesitation wasn't out of grief for Yu Muxian, but fear of their crumbling support and the overwhelming power displayed by the Li family. Injayan, fully playing his role, gave a subtle nod of approval to the Kai family member. The group took to the skies and disappeared, leaving as suddenly as they had come. As soon as they left, the remaining Yu family members collectively let out a sigh of relief. Their eyes turned toward the Kai family member holding the formation plate, their expressions varying from suspicion to anger. The Kai family member, unaffected, calmly returned to the courtyard, his demeanor composed. Smiling warmly, he cupped his fist toward the central figure and said, "So Yu Muxian is dead. Family head, why did you not inform us?" His words made Yu Chengyi's face darken. Middle-aged with mediocre cultivation, Yu Chengyi struggled to suppress his anger and fear as he replied in a low voice, "What is the meaning of this, Master Kai? I was unaware of this matter. How could I have concealed it?" Before he could finish, a panicked figure rushed forward, his face pale as he cried out, "Family head, family head. Master Lu has rallied his forces behind the third young master and taken control of the outer immortal mountain." Both Master Kai and Yu Chengyi's faces. Before they could respond, another person came forward, shouting, "Family head. The external families have all broken into open conflict." Yu Chengyi's expression turned grim as he looked at Master Kai, speaking in a hushed tone, "Master Kai, given the current situation, we have no choice but to join forces if we are to protect ourselves." Injayan flew into the sky, his heart filled with a torrent of emotions. He glanced back, seemingly wanting to say something, but his throat caught and he could not find the words. Li Wushou gave him a glare, prompting him to laugh awkwardly before sulkily riding the wind away. As they flew over a grove of trees, Injayan suddenly seemed to remember something and said, embarrassed, "My lord, let me make a quick stop." Li Wushou, uninterested, gave a slight nod, and Injayan descended into a courtyard surrounded by orange trees. Years ago, he had passed through this place and taken shelter here. A mortal couple had given him a bowl of duck soup, the flavor of which lingered in his memory. Unable to resist, he landed to see what had become of the place. To his surprise, the house was in ruins, covered in dust and cobwebs. Injayan thought to himself, surely, with the gold I gave them, they must have moved to the city to live comfortably. Not wanting to keep the brooding hooked serpent waiting, he prepared to leave. Just as his spiritual sense swept over the area, he froze, then strode forward and kicked the door open. Boom! The door shattered under his foot, revealing the state of the interior. Dust blanketed everything, weeds grew unchecked, and a few wild rabbits darted around the courtyard. Startled birds flapped noisily into the sky as Injayan stepped inside. Scattered around the courtyard were a few rusted hose and a small but deep pit, as though something had been buried there long ago. He pushed open the kitchen door and immediately saw a set of white bones lying atop the stove. The skeleton was small, its hands wedged tightly into a crack in the stone. The flesh had long since rotted away, but the iron lock still hung grimly on the window. Injayan said nothing and walked into the inner room. Another skeleton lay sprawled across the decaying bed, its larger frame sprawled out haphazardly. Bones littered the floor and the spine was shattered in several places, bearing the unmistakable marks of blade strikes. Silent, Injayan left the courtyard. With a wave of his sleeve, the entire structure collapsed into rubble in an instant. He took to the skies once more, his expression growing more and more fearsome. Not a word escaped his lips as he led his group onward. From above, Li Wushou observed everything clearly but remained silent. Injayan, who had just avenged a fraction of his old grudge today, felt no joy at all. His face sagged on both sides like that of an old dog, his eyes dull and lifeless. He flew onward, only speaking when they reached the mountain and entered the protective formation. Damn this cursed world. Chapter 631, The Yuan Family's Shield I. And Jian returned to the mountain. After just 4 hours, he entered the hall to find that the family head, Li Zicheng, and the heir had already left. Only Li Qinglao remained, seated at the desk. The setting sun streamed into the hall, casting long shadows across the floor. Li Qinglao stared absent-mindedly at the teacup on the desk, and Jian bowed deeply and reported, "Young master, the matter has been handled. The Yu family is in complete disarray, teetering on the edge of collapse. In just a few days, the infighting will create an entirely new situation." Li Qinglao nodded slightly and replied, "Thank you for your hard work, Peak Guardian." As the family's Peak Guardian, and Jian acknowledged the response with a nod and stepped back. Li Qinglao then summoned Du Yi and said, "Milan Prefecture will sooner or later belong to our family. We cannot allow it to be ruined by their reckless destruction." Du Yi understood immediately and responded, "I will send our people to give them a reminder." "Good," Li Qinglao said softly. "Let them fight however they please, but if they start slaughtering the common people or destroying spirit fields, they can expect us to settle accounts with them later." Du Yi bowed and withdrew. Li Qinglao's expression turned somewhat grim as he toyed with the teacup, lost in thought. The delay in moving against the Yu family stemmed from reasons both strategic and deeply personal. Chief among them was the Li family's long-standing grudge against the Yu family. The elder generation of the clan, especially, bore an undying hatred due to the tragic death of the young master Yuanxiu years ago. They had never let go of their bitterness. Li Zicheng and Li Qinglao, father and son, shared this sentiment. Neither of them had particularly outstanding cultivation, but both hoped to leave their mark on history. For them, having their names recorded in the annals of the family was a goal worth pursuing. Just a single sentence, like "In the autumn of the 7th month, young Master Liao destroyed the Yu clan," would have made Li Qinglao feel his life was complete. If it ended up recorded as a victory over the splintered Kai or Lu families instead, it would lose its grandeur. Still, no matter what, we must ensure the Yu family never finds a way to recover, he thought as he sipped his tea. The balance between satisfaction and caution. One always has to compromise. Li Qinglao stood and finalized his arrangements for the events below the mountain. Then he rode the wind to Mount Qingdu. With Li Zijian in seclusion, Qingdu Peak was managed by Li Xuanxuan, with assistance from Li Yuexiang and Li Qinglao. As he landed, he saw Li Yuexiang dressed in white, standing with a sword in hand. Li Yuexiang practiced the Pheasant Flame's long march technique and had already reached the early qi cultivation. Her abilities were beginning to take shape, with deep red flames swirling around her, coiling along the length of her sword. Her swordsmanship was decent, and her slender hands twirled the blade gracefully, scattering pheasant flames in all directions in a dazzling display. When her movement ceased, she sheathed her sword and turned her almond-shaped eyes toward Li Qinglao, asking, "How did it go?" "No major issues," Li Qinglao replied briefly. He was about to provide more details when the great formation atop the mountain began to shimmer with green light, and a booming male voice rang out, "Yuan Chengdan of Mushroom Forest greets you. I request permission to enter your formation. The Yuan family is here." Both of their expressions changed. Li Yuexiang stepped onto a flame cloud and flew up, opening a small gap in Qingdu's Green Ox River Embrace formation. Blinking, she cupped her fist and greeted softly, "Li Yuexiang of Qingdu greets the senior." The man before her exuded a commanding presence, his appearance upright and dignified, with an aura that brooked no disrespect. At his waist hung 2 short rods etched with intricate patterns, glowing faintly with cyan and yellow light. His cultivation was at the late Foundation establishment realm, and his strength was profound. This man was Yuan Chengdan of sprawling Azure Mountain, a figure of great renown in the Yuan family, and hailed as their greatest genius in a century. Despite being just over 60 years old, he had already reached the late stages of Foundation establishment realm. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, carrying a weight of authority. "Are you the descendant of an old acquaintance?" Li Yuexiang invited him into the formation and replied gently, "My father was Li Yunjiao." Yuan Chengdan fell silent for a moment before responding, "I once fought alongside your father. Even then, I never saw him exert his full strength. I never imagined he would fall to that man from the Yu family." Yuan Chengdan had once fought alongside Li Yunjiao, slaying a pig demon together and later battling Fu Demu of Mount Yue. This shared history often came up in conversation. Li Yuexiang had heard this story so many times over the years that she barely reacted, instead leading Yuan Chengdan onward. She first guided him to pay respects at Li Yunjiao's shrine, lighting incense for her father, before directing him to the main hall. The Yuan family was in considerable disarray these days, leaving little room for involvement in outside matters. As the central figure in their turmoil, Yuan Chengdan's visit was certainly not without purpose. He followed Li Yuexiang into the hall, where Li Xuanxun was already waiting for him. Yuan Chengdun, being of the same generation as Li Yunjiao, greeted Li Xuanxun as an elder. Despite Yuan Chengdun's formidable reputation likely unmatched by anyone in Li Xuanxun's family, except his own younger brother Li Xuanxun remained humble and exchanged polite words. Without any preamble, Yuan Chengdun got straight to the point. Zijai, my aunt's eldest disciple, is likely aware of some news. My aunt has been missing in the Eastern Sea for 2 years now, and there has been no word of her. The rest of my family, short-sighted as they are still busy squabbling amongst themselves. He paused briefly before continuing in a low voice. I have no interest in fighting them for control and left them to their mess. I plan to head to the Eastern Sea. I have received some leads suggesting she may be near the Kunyi Strait. My first priority is to find my aunt. Direct and candid, Yuan Chengdun laid out his plans in just a few sentences. Li Xuanxun responded courteously. The Peak Master is an individual of great fortune. I am certain she will be found safe and sound. Thank you for your kind words, Yuan Chengdun replied, his voice deep and resonant like mountain stone. He continued, as for the Yuan family, there is little left for me to hold on to. My only obligation is to repay the kindness of my clan uncle Yuan Haiyuan, who supported me through all these years. But before I leave for the Eastern Sea, there is one matter I cannot let go of. I have a son. Yuan Chengdun paused, and Li Yuexiang immediately understood. Her phoenix-like eyes slightly lifted as she focused intently on what he was about to say. I have only this one child. If I head to the Eastern Sea, there are 2 risks. My whereabouts will be uncertain, and my safety will be in jeopardy. Should something happen to me out there, my clan uncle will not be able to protect him. The usually bold and straightforward man seemed slightly embarrassed as he continued, his voice quieter. I have heard that Yuexiang has not yet been betrothed. On the strength of our past friendship, I have come here boldly to propose an alliance through marriage. Such a union would be mutually beneficial. He patted his chest and added with conviction, I will not make empty promises. Over the years, I have fought demons across the land and achieved countless victories. The betrothal gifts I offer will surely satisfy you. This. Li Xuanxun froze for a full moment, then turned his head to look at the young woman in white. Her phoenix-like eyes met his directly, unflinching, filled with a clarity that struck him like a lightning bolt across the face. His cheeks flushed, his legs grew weak, and he momentarily fell into a trance. Li Xuanxun paused, momentarily lost in thought. The old man before him stood with his white hair gently tousled by the wind, the wrinkles on his face faintly trembling. It seemed he wasn't even listening to the conversation anymore. Instead, an image of a face appeared in his mind. She had round almond eyes, stubborn yet endearing, with a pair of intelligent eyes that stared directly at him. Faintly, a soft voice seemed to echo in his ears. Elder brother, do you want me to marry Chen Dong? Jingshan. Li Xuanxun muttered weakly under his breath. Chapter 632, The Yuan Family's Shield II. Yuan Chengdun, assuming Li Xuanxun was merely pondering, continued waiting, but Li Xuanxun's unfocused eyes and slumped face told another story. Breathing heavily, he suddenly snapped out of his trance and rasped, this matter still depends on Yuexiang's decision. He took a small step back after saying this, his weariness as an elder becoming evident. Yuan Chengdun paused in surprise, then turned to look at the young woman standing beside him. Li Yuexiang's gray-black eyes carried a trace of Li Yunjiao's coloring. Her face was delicate and beautiful, but her most striking feature was her pair of phoenix-like eyes inherited from her mother. Yuan Chengdun met those eyes directly. They were bright and unwavering, without even the faintest trace of fear or deference, despite his reputation as a Foundation establishment realm cultivator renowned throughout Jiangnan. Instead, her gaze was calm and composed, exuding a quiet strength. A fine young woman, Yuan Chengdun thought to himself, his heart stirred. Li Yuexiang softly asked, May I inquire, senior, about your son's temperament, his level of cultivation, and his age? Yuan Chengdun sighed and replied, He is about the same age as you. However, he lost his mother at a young age and has rarely received my guidance. Within the clan, he has suffered some injustices. While he is kind-hearted, he cannot help but be a little weak in character. The man spoke honestly, laying bare his son's shortcomings without embellishment. This sincerity caused Li Yuexiang to view him in a better light. She responded gently, as the saying goes, like father, like son. I will reserve my judgment. Why not have your son visit Moongaze Lake? I can take him for a walk around the lake and have a good conversation with him. Yuan Chengdun hesitated briefly, but Li Yuexiang smoothly continued, If the matter does not work out, your son can also remain here to study the Tao and spells with our family. When you return, you can take him back with you. Yuan Chengdun had dealings with the Zhao family of Mount Yu in the past. At the time, Zhao Xian could have married his sister, but Zhao Jiuqing had made a firm decision to have him marry Li Qingxiao instead. Back then, Yuan Chengdun hadn't understood the reasoning, as he was still young and full of pride. My Yuan family, a great clan with hundreds of years of history, how could we not match the Li family? That was what he thought back then. Now seeing Li Yuexiang, Yuan Chengdun finally understood Xiao Jiuking's perspective. After a moment of silence, he said softly, I do not have much time left. When my child arrives, we will settle the engagement. I will leave the betrothal gifts here. If Yuexiang truly dislikes him, your family need not force the matter. Consider the gifts as my token of respect for your clan. As he finished speaking, Yuan Chengdun waved his large hand, and a heap of jade boxes appeared in the hall. The clinking sound of Dharma artifacts filled the air as they scattered across the floor. Most of the items were crafted primitively by demon clans, with materials far exceeding the skill used to shape them. Li Yuexiang paused, her expression unshaken, and said softly, if this arrangement does not work out, I will personally ensure all these items are handed over to your son. Yuan Chengdun gave her a deep look and replied in his resonant voice, very well. He said no more, cupping his fist respectfully to a dazed Li Xuanxuan before riding the wind and departing. As he left, the sky broke into a downpour. Yuan Chengdun flew through the rain, gazing at the overcast sky with a complicated expression. If only Yayar could rise to the occasion. With a family like this as his support and a sharp-witted wife like her, there would be nothing to fear anymore. Yuan Chengdun continued with a trace of concern, but I worry this dog son of mine will not live up to her, always looking at shallow places and walking into murky waters. One day something will happen and he will meet a tragic end. Yuan Chengdun's time with his son had been brief, leaving him feeling a deep sense of guilt. It was this guilt that had driven him to make this trip. Flying through the clouds, he thought to himself, children and grandchildren have their own destinies. I cannot control everything. Yuan Chengdun's decision to leave was not as simple as he claimed. In truth, the internal strife within the Yuan family had reached a fever pitch, with the involvement of various external forces becoming increasingly evident. Both Yuan Haiyuan and Yuan Chengdun were deeply concerned. His journey to hide in the Eastern Sea was both a retreat to safeguard himself and an attempt to find a way out of the predicament. He aimed to locate Yuan Tuan and resolve the crises besieging them. Yuan Chengdun gradually disappeared into the torrential rain as he flew further away. On Mount Qingdu, Li Yuexiang deliberately took a storage pouch and carefully collected the items scattered on the ground, meticulously sorting and recording them. It took her an hour to categorize everything. Once she had finished her tasks and raised her head, she noticed Li Xuanxuan still staring blankly at her. Li Yuexiang misunderstood his intentions slightly and frowned as she asked, Grandfather, are you planning for me to marry that young master from the Yuan family? Who could have guessed that such a simple question would cause Li Xuanxuan to leap from his seat in the grand hall? He hurriedly stepped forward from his lower seat and exclaimed, I Jingshan, it is entirely up to you to decide. Li Yuexiang lowered her head slightly and replied, Grandfather, you have mistaken me for someone else. Li Xuanxuan seemed to awaken from a dream. The light in his eyes dimmed quickly as he murmured, Xianger, it is your choice. The family does not lack these things now, no need to force yourself. He muttered a few more words, something about evaluating his character, and don't think about the family's expectations. Shortly after, he left in a fluster, stepping into the pouring rain. In a rush, he ascended the stone steps toward the mountainside cemetery. Li Yuexiang gently hung the storage pouch on the jade belt at her waist. As she slowly walked out under the eaves, her voice was light. We will just see what kind of person this so-called son of sprawling Azure Mountain is. Her phoenix-like eyes, sharper than almond-shaped eyes, differed from the heroic aura of Li Qingheng. Having been raised by Li Zijin since childhood, Li Yuexiang concealed a thoughtful and calculating mind beneath her calm and gentle demeanor. She didn't mind a political marriage, but she had her plans and considerations. Eastern Sea. The scarlet pristine sea remained its usual blend of azure and crimson, with whales leaping and gulls soaring as waves crashed mightily. A streak of purple light sped in from the distance, stopping swiftly above the sea's surface. Li Qingheng rode the wind as she flew over the waves. The jade bottle in her hand shimmered with flashes of violet lightning, with thunder-like patterns that flickered ominously. The power coalesced into a sphere of purple light around her as she continued southward. Over the past 2 years, Li Qingheng had managed to collect 2 additional spirit thunders in the Eastern Sea. Together with the Silverhook spirit thunder she had acquired earlier, she now wielded 3. During this journey of collecting thunders, she had also discovered the profound utility of the artifact in her hands. The 3 thunders resided within the bottle, neither interfering with nor repelling one another. Instead, they nourished each other, enhancing the artifact's power. The 2 spirit thunders had been highly sought after, and her journey had been anything but smooth. The Eastern Sea was rife with bloodshed and darkness. To claim these thunders, many had fallen beneath her spear. Having studied the Cloud Thunder Inquiry technique, Li Qingheng had greatly improved her mastery of thunder techniques. Previously, there had been few thunder-based techniques for her to study, but now, with her cultivation of this method, her strength had advanced considerably. Riding the wind for some time, Li Qingheng finally saw Zongquan Island appear before her. The island was bustling with activity, its palaces and pavilions scattered across the landscape. Chapter 633, Yunzai Ozi I. Li Qingheng paused briefly as a figure rose into the air, wearing flowing robes and clasping their hands in salute. This lowly one greets your grace. Zhang Yan, who had been living comfortably in recent years, now carried himself with a confidence that starkly contrasted with his former servile demeanor as a subordinate to the demon clans. His eyes shone brightly, and his posture was upright, although faint traces of his past struggles remained. Li Qingheng, ever courteous, responded politely to Zhang Yan and listened as he meticulously recited the island's expenses down to the last detail. Zhang Yan nervously finished his report. The accounts naturally showed deficits after all. The small island had no productive output, and the resources of the sea were dominated by the dragon clans, leaving others no room to intervene. As Zhang Yan spoke, the white-clad female cultivator before him appeared distracted, her gaze wandering over the island's scenery, further unsettling him. Zhang Yan harbored complex feelings toward the Li family. Alongside deep gratitude, he felt the customary Eastern Sea deference bordering on submission toward power. For someone like Li Qingheng, a Foundation establishment realm cultivator capable of leveling the island in anger, Zhang Yan also carried an immense fear of being discarded. Li Yunjiao had spent considerable time on the island, and Zhang Yan knew him to be a man who detested bullying and despised blood sacrifices. That understanding brought him some comfort. Facing Li Qingheng, who remained a relative stranger, Zhang Yan did not dare to gamble on her temperament. Qingheng the monk soon arrived, descending from the sky with his characteristic serene demeanor. His hands pressed together in a gesture of respect. He spoke softly. "It has been many years. Fellow Taoist, you have made significant progress." The monk, who naturally had small eyes, became even harder to read as he lowered his gaze. Li Qingheng replied casually, her attention still elsewhere, letting Zhang Yan continue his report about the island's loss of several hundred caddies of spirit patties. She didn't seem to hear him, simply waving her hand and saying, "Not bad, the population seems sufficient." Li Qingheng's initial reaction upon arriving mirrored that of her brother. Her spiritual sense swept across the island, searching for temples or statues. Finding none, she relaxed slightly. At these words, Qingheng froze momentarily before closing his eyes and murmuring a prayer under his breath. Zhang Yan was briefly stunned as well. Only then did he realize that the kind, stoic, middle-aged man he had known was gone. Offering a few brief words of condolence, Zhang Yan refrained from the typical Eastern Sea formalities. Instead, he directly led Li Qingheng to the cave dwelling where Li Yunjiao had once meditated in isolation. Stepping inside, Li Qingheng found the cave pristine and spotless. The floor was polished smooth, and the room was devoid of clutter. There were no incense burners, altars, or jade furniture, only a single gray meditation cushion at the center. Li Qingheng stood silently for a moment before picking up the cushion. Sweeping it with her spiritual sense, she found it to be an ordinary item of the qi cultivation realm. Flipping her hand, she stored it away. Just as she was about to speak, the island's grand defensive formation roared to life. Lifting her gaze, Li Qingheng connected her spiritual sense to the formation and saw a fish-headed humanoid demon standing outside. The creature had fleshy wings sprouting from its back and crouched impatiently by the barrier, its demeanor brimming with irritation. "Huiyao has arrived." Li Qingheng's almond-shaped eyes flickered with subtle movement as she thought to herself, "It seems the waters around Zhongquan Island are teeming with countless offspring. I merely crossed the sea, and this demon has already caught wind of it." Rising into the air, she flicked her sleeve to create an opening in the defensive formation. Huiyao flapped its fleshy wings as it flew inside. The old demon had finally broken through to the Foundation establishment realm and taken on a human form, though it still retained its fish head with oversized eyes. Huiyao's large eyes widened further as it took in Li Qingheng's appearance. Its gaze briefly settled on the purple lightning coiled beneath her feet, and it was visibly startled. The creature quickly adjusted its demeanor. Its fish head began to contract and stretch, eventually morphing into the visage of an old man. The Hui clan, a species of aquatic demons, primarily cultivated the water mansion system. Even after assuming human form, their features often retained strange, fish-like characteristics, including segmented faces split into two halves. Li Qingheng, clad in an aura of thunder, appeared far more intimidating than her brother. Huiyao quickly restrained himself and barked, "Where is Li Yunjiao? He promised to join me in battle, yet I don't see him anywhere." The demon had visited the island several times, only to be met with evasion. Zhang Yan claimed ignorance, and Qingheng demanded he stop engaging in blood sacrifices. Fearing manipulation, Huiyao avoided further conversations. Now finally encountering another member of the Li family, the demon wasted no time asking questions. Li Qingheng glanced at him briefly and said in a calm voice, "My brother was injured in the Green Pine Grotto Heaven and has returned home to recover. Moreover, since he killed a Taoist master's disciple, he cannot leave the family grounds. For the next 10 or so years, I will be stationed here." Li Qinghong initially intended to keep her family background concealed, but given the scarcity of thunder cultivators, the distinctiveness of Foundation establishment, realm immortal foundations, techniques, and Dharma artifacts made it easy to recognize her origins. Seeing that Huiyao had already deduced her background, she saw no point in further concealment. Huiyao snorted twice, clearly surprised that the Li family had managed to secure a foothold in the Green Pine Grotto heaven, and even more shocked to learn they had killed a Taoist master's disciple. His skepticism evident, he probed, "Oh, which Taoist master might this be?" This piece of news, still circulating only in the mainland and not yet among the demon clans, would soon spread. Calculating the timeline, Li Qinghong guessed it was close and dismissively waved her hand, saying, "Your clan's channels are extensive. Give it a month or two and you will know." This statement seemed to partially convince Huiyao. Muttering to himself, "Fine, fine," he suddenly grinned and added, "Still, fellow Taoist wielding thunder arts, your presence is a great boon. Let us send that wretched cloud octopus into the depths of the sea." Li Qinghong asked, "What kind of demon are you planning to slay this time?" Huiyao replied, "Just a cloud octopus. It cultivates the soft advanced system, with its Tao foundation rooted in auspicious Qi clouds. It is a greedy monster at the late Foundation Establishment realm, with 2 subordinate Foundation Establishment realm demons and over 100 Qi cultivation realm minions under its command." Huiyao continued, "This damned thing, relying on its ability to traverse wind and clouds, has been raiding my territory. Worse, its lousy Tao foundation has earned the favor of the Dragon Sun. I must kill it now before the new Dragon Sun descends and allows it to further lord over me." Pointing southward, Huiyao rasped, "Head directly south from here. The more clouds and mist you encounter, the closer you will get to the coastal edge near the easternmost part of the southern sea. That is where it resides." Li Qinghong weighed the forces of both sides, sensing that their group was slightly weaker. She asked, "Do you have any reinforcements? Surely it is not just you, a lone demon general." Huiyao replied, "My 2367th younger brother Huier will join us. He is at the Mid-Foundation Establishment realm." Li Qinghong was momentarily stunned and with a wry smile remarked, "Your mother certainly left behind a prosperous legacy." Chapter 634, Yunzia Ozi, II. Huiyao, reverting to his fish-headed form, led the way while muttering over his shoulder, "My clan produces offspring annually, with each brood numbering 36,000. Out of those, only 3 transform into serpent fish. The rest devolve into eels, lampreys, and moray eels. We are nothing like you humans." This left both Li Qinghong and Qingheng astonished. Huiyao sighed deeply and muttered, "The Hui fish clan originated from the union of the 3rd son of the hornless dragon's 5th grandson and a lamprey. Who knows how diluted our lineage has become? Even after a millennium, we have ended up as such a pathetic sight." Huiyao grumbled, "You humans, on the other hand, benefited from your ancestors' early beginnings, amassing countless metallic essences and fruition attainments. You have established stable foundations, dividing lineages into different surnames to distinguish noble descendants. With countless cultivation methods available, how could we possibly compare?" Huiyao kept nagging. "Even the descendants of the true hornless dragon after 10,000 years have achieved only minor success in water virtue and the 12 essences. When all is said and done, they still fall short of you humans." Huiyao's demeanor lacked the pride typically associated with dragon lineage demons. Instead, he appeared somewhat despondent. Shrugging, he remarked, "Otherwise, why else would we eat humans? They are a tremendous supplement. Even a mere fraction of their essence would provide benefits beyond measure." Neither Li Qinghong nor Qingheng replied, silently listening. Huiyao quickly shifted the topic, explaining, "This cloud octopus cultivates the soft advance, one of the 12 essences, also called auspicious essence. Its direct combat strength is not particularly high, just make sure it does not escape." The Tao lineages, such as water virtue or fire virtue, included numerous types. The 12 essences were one of them, encompassing 12 categories. Some were particularly famous, such as the purple essence of the Purple Smoke Gate and the radiant essence of the Golden Feather Sect. The most common, however, was the widely known minor Pure Spiritual Qi, which belonged to the Pure Essence category. It was the easiest to gather and was commonly cultivated by rogue cultivators. Qingheng, having traveled widely, was familiar with many of these, but Li Qinghong, who had not encountered much, found herself curious. Together they flew south, the sky growing darker as they advanced. Li Qinghong assessed their strength and concluded that this group of demons posed no significant threat. Keeping some distance, she and the others flew deeper south. Around them, gray mists began to rise, swirling and lingering. The mists coiled around their auras of light, and the surrounding spiritual energy gradually diminished. After another 15 minutes of flight, a massive vortex erupted, spinning into the gray fog and transforming into torrential rain that poured down heavily. The spiritual energy in this area remained relatively dense. Several gray 8-legged octopuses descended from the air. Some of these cloud octopuses had already gained cultivation, riding clouds and fog to hover above. These massive creatures carried various animals and even humans in their tentacles. Upon seeing the group, they scattered, with some spraying golden mist as they dove into the sea to escape. Huiao, observing this scene, was elated. Laughing internally, he thought, heaven is dooming this old thing. Bringing along 2 righteous cultivators to witness your crimes will only deepen their hatred. Qingheng closed his eyes slightly, saying nothing. Vague cries echoed in the air. Li Qingheng frowned, feeling they might be acting rashly. Before she could speak, Huiao stepped forward, pulling out a golden scroll. He slowly unrolled it, feigning a serious reading, and shouted, Yunzai Ozi, the dragon son has already arrived at the scarlet pristine sea. Why are you not hurrying to greet him? At this, the surrounding gray fog visibly trembled. A massive gray octopus emerged, its tentacles weaving through the clouds. Its skin was covered in countless sea-dwelling beetles. 2 enormous, pitch-black eyes as large as windows stared fixedly at the group. The cloud octopus quickly transformed into a human form, a hook-nosed old man with a sunken nose bridge and a wooden staff. He appeared doubtful, demanding, what nonsense is this? Where is the token? Huiao cursed loudly, you blind, bubble-eyed fool, you dare question the token. With a cold smirk, he grabbed Huiao and said, let us go. Do not blame me for not warning you. He turned to leave, flying off. Yunzai Ozi couldn't stay calm. Not daring to gamble, it hastily rode the clouds to catch up, calling out, I was only joking. Flying several li, it finally caught up with the group. Li Qingheng thought to herself, this demon has improved. Its schemes are now somewhat credible, good enough for dealing with demons. Huiao swaggered with a dominant air, clearly carrying out a well-rehearsed plan. With a cold smile, he said, the dragon son values me and tasked me with personally welcoming guests. Show some respect. Yunzai Ozi scrutinized Li Qingheng and Qingheng. Huiao introduced them. These are disciples of the immortal sects. Yunzai Ozi had no choice but to step forward. As soon as it moved a few steps, the 4 immediately launched their attack. Thunder, fire, spiritual light, and demonic energy simultaneously struck it. Explosions and roars reverberated. Boom! Yunzai Ozi emitted a sharp shriek as golden mist erupted from its body, spreading over a 10-li radius. Violent clashes and blasts echoed, and its figure disappeared amidst the chaos. Huiao burst into triumphant laughter. Pulling out a bell from his robes, he held it aloft. It glimmered with a translucent green light. Raising it to the sky, he blew on it lightly and shook it. Clang, clang, clang. A series of sharp bell chimes echoed, and the turbulent waves beneath instantly stilled, transforming into a gray, mirror-like surface, as flat and silent as if chiseled from stone. Above the sea, it seemed as though a breeze swept through a field, rustling faintly. The golden mist dispersed in an instant, and several previously obscured spiritual senses swept across the ocean, all chasing southward. You borrowed a Dharma artifact. Yunzai Ozi appeared disheveled, his face scorched black and filled with panic. A streak of violet light streaked toward him, spearpoint gleaming, aiming straight for his back. Thunder techniques, Yunzai Ozi cried out. Knowing his human form no longer concealed him, 8 tendrils burst from beneath his robes. His lips transformed into a sharp, bird-like purple-black beak that quickly retracted into the writhing mass of his bloated flesh. The enormous 8-tentacled creature emerged amidst the gray sea of clouds. Though her cultivation was slightly weaker, Li Qingheng showed no fear. Her spear swept horizontally, unleashing a rain of lightning bolts. A violet profound patterned bottle floated up from her waist, hovering steadily as it aimed at the creature's eyes. Threads of purple lightning began to gather, and dark clouds quickly covered the sky, flashing with thunder. Li Qingheng only used a fraction of her strength, not even resorting to her treasured profound thunderpool, yet the display alone terrified the creature. Realizing she was the most formidable of his opponents, Yunzai Ozi cried out, fellow Taoist. What grievance do we have against each other? Boom! The thunderbolt answered faster than her words. A pillar of lightning erupted from the violet bottle, its purple and white radiance intertwined as it struck Yunzai Ozi's massive body. His flesh was seared black, split open and scorched, forcing a shrill scream from his beak. Furious, his 8 tentacles lashed out wildly toward the air. Clang! At that moment, the narrow-eyed monk burst forth with a brilliant golden light. Sitting cross-legged in midair, his previously tranquil expression shifted as his eyes snapped open with a commanding aura. Without a word, he extended a hand. Golden light poured forth, crashing down and forcibly pinning all of Yunzai Ozi's flailing tentacles back into place. Qingheng had not wasted the years since his breakthrough. No longer the fledgling monk who had just become a master monk, he radiated an aura of authority. The golden light blazed with searing heat, scorching Yunzai Ozi's tentacles until they curled up in retreat, quivering as they tried to avoid it. It was then that Huiao and Huier finally arrived, late to the battle. The 2 demon fish exchanged glances, their expressions betraying mutual bewilderment and fear. Damn it, what the hell do they even need us for? Chapter 635, The Profound Method of Continuation, I. The cloud octopus had just been subdued when two more demon octopi flew out of the sea, breaking through the air with bared fangs and brandished claws. They collided with King Heng's golden light, causing it to waver slightly and granting Yun Ziozi a brief opportunity to breathe. He channeled his demonic power to fend off the incoming thunder. King Heng, though slightly strained, maintained an unperturbed expression. Instead, a peculiar glint appeared in his eyes. Over the years, he had mastered many spells, but subduing 3 demons simultaneously was beyond his limits. He found the 2 newly arrived demons surprisingly weak, and upon closer inspection, activated his spellbound eyes. These 2 demons seem odd. They appear to be clones. No wonder the 2 serpent fishes show no fear. While he continued suppressing the 3 demons, Li Qinghong in the air above was not idle. Thunder gathered in her hands, and the long spear she wielded turned the surrounding spiritual energy into a brilliant violet hue. With a flourish, she unleashed a spark with her spear, which transformed into the image of a sparrow. The long spear emitted a conical violet wave in midair, surrounded by thunder. In response, 7 or 8 bolts of lightning descended from the sky, creating an awe-inspiring spectacle. Yun Ziozi was alarmed, thinking to himself, "This is not good. She must be a disciple of an immortal sect. If she truly intends to kill me, I will not escape alive under such a barrage of thunder." Realizing escape was futile, he abandoned the thought, baring his fangs in determination. He knew he had no choice but to fight to the death. Stretching out his 8 tentacles, he surged through the clouds and mist, frantically absorbing energy. Meanwhile, Huia, with his round, bun-like face, hesitated to intervene, fearing that stepping forward would result in being suppressed by the golden light. He thought to himself in alarm, dealing with a monk is already bad enough, but now there is also a thunder cultivator. They speak of merging fire to exorcise demons, and heavenly thunder restrains filth. But in this world, what demon does not carry some corruption? Yun Ziozi, caught between the thunder and his desperate attempts to absorb the spiritual energy around him, caused the energy in the area to plummet. Even the sea, which had been sealed into a flat expanse of land, showed faint cracks as if it might leap and churn under the strain of his spell. Since her breakthrough to the mid-foundation establishment realm, her thunder reservoir had increased to 2 profound thunder. If she were to recklessly expend her temporary mana to conjure a third, it would be enough to end Yun Ziozi, a demon without a proper Dao lineage. Yet she hesitated, distrusting the 2 demon fishes. Huyao burst into loud laughter and shouted, "At last I can be of use." He blew and struck the small jade-green bell floating midair. The bell trembled and swayed with a faint hum, sending out ripples that halted the surging flow of spiritual energy. The energy lingered in the air, suspended and indecisive, unable to find its path. Yun Ziozi, never having faced such a situation, flailed his 8 tentacles in a frenzy. He writhed wildly in midair, struggling to resist the incoming thunder. Unlike Yu Muxian, who was a prodigy in spellcasting, Yun Ziozi was helpless in this predicament. While Yun Ziozi's spell clashed against the green bell's power, Li Qinghong put away her profound thunder. Her long hair flowed freely as she leaped into the fray with unrestrained energy. Thunder and black smoke surged in all directions as she wielded her violet lightning spear, moving effortlessly through the attacks of the 3 demons. Li Qinghong had arrived in the Eastern Sea only to face unsatisfying battles thus far. Her opponents were either dealt with in 2 quick strikes or refused to fight her to the death. This time, she finally found a worthy challenge. The talisman chi within her surged faintly, and with every clash her strength grew fiercer. Yun Ziozi, trapped in the chaos, found himself in utter despair. The power of the lightning in the female cultivator's spear grew stronger, and her spear aura sharper. Torn flesh and blood flew high into the air, raining down in a crimson storm, attracting swarms of fish to feast upon it. Forced to abandon his spell, Yun Ziozi noticed that the 2 serpent fish had already entangled his subordinates. Meanwhile, the bald monk's glowing golden palms landed heavy, crushing strikes directly on Yun Ziozi's body. Having lost the initiative and suppressed by the artifact, Yun Ziozi found himself unable to effectively cast his spells. He was forced into direct combat with Li Qinghong, barely holding his ground. With the master monk joining the fight, Yun Ziozi's predicament grew increasingly dire. This was a flaw shared by most cultivators outside the dragon clans, immortal gate scions, and major powers. They often relied on just a handful of signature techniques. Once they lost the upper hand or were countered early, they quickly fell into disadvantage and could not sustain themselves. Desperate, Yun Ziozi activated his immortal foundation and hastily cast several self-created spells. He summoned Golden Mist to block the attacks, but under the combined assault of his 2 enemies, his defenses seemed pale and ineffective. The only remotely threatening move he had was his occasional use of a purple-black beak. The beak was incredibly sharp and charged with destructive power. It could bite through thunder with ease. Even King Heng, with his iron-like palms, had to avoid the beak's attacks carefully. After a fierce exchange, Kung Heng finally brought out his ancient bronze staff. It rang loudly with metallic clangs as it struck Yun Zai Ozi repeatedly. The strikes reduced his flesh to pulp and left him on the brink of collapse. Yun Zai Ozi resisted desperately, but his strength was only comparable to that of Fu Demu in the past. Fu Demu, at least, had the advantage of being a disciple of Mount Wu and wielding a Foundation Establishment realm artifact. Yun Zai Ozi had neither of these. Unable to withstand the relentless assault, he continuously threw out talismans and spirit items in a futile attempt to defend himself. Despite being in the late stage of Foundation Establishment realm and carrying numerous treasures and talismans, Yun Zai Ozi was forced to flee southward for hundreds of li. Blood and golden mist trailed behind him as pieces of his flesh peeled away during the desperate chase. Finally cornered at the cape, Li Qingheng severed Yun Zai Ozi's 8th tentacle, rendering him completely incapable of resistance. After battling through the entire night, her mana was greatly depleted. However, her momentum only grew fiercer. By the end, each spear strike was 20% stronger than when the fight began. With Kung Heng blocking Yun Zai Ozi's escape route, they finally managed to bring the demon down. Li Qingheng forced Yun Zai Ozi into his humanoid form. His previous saddle-nosed, elder appearance had been reduced to just a head connected to a withered torso. Closing his eyes tightly, Yun Zai Ozi begged for mercy. Li Qingheng sealed his immortal foundation and his beak. Only then did the 2 serpent fish demons finally arrive. Each of the serpent fish demons held a cloud octopus in hand, both of them barely alive. The octopi's 8 tentacles had been devoured completely, clearly consumed by the 2 demons. Seeing the overwhelming strength of the 2 cultivators, Huiyao quickly changed his demeanor. Putting away his green bell, he became respectful and deferential, exclaiming, "Your Grace, such powerful thunder techniques. Master Monk, such powerful spells." The demon clearly wasn't accustomed to such flattery, repeating powerful over and over in its speech, characteristic of its kind's lack of moral burden and willingness to change attitudes in an instant. Li Qingheng, unsurprised, pointed to Yun Zai Ozi and said, "Let us not discuss how the rest of the spoils will be divided for now. He is mine, I still have use for him." Huiyao nodded repeatedly in agreement. Kung Heng glanced at the cloud octopus heads held by the 2 serpent fish demons, a look of doubt crossing his face, and remarked, "These 2 creatures seem surprisingly weak." Li Qingheng silently turned her head, hiding a smile. She wasn't sure if Kung Heng's words were deliberate, but the serpent fish brothers seemed entirely oblivious. One of them hurriedly explained, "Master Monk, you may not know, but Yun Zai Ozi's Dao Foundation is quite peculiar. These 2 are not normal Foundation Establishment realm demons but products of a fortuitous opportunity." Huiyao continued, "Years ago, he severed 8 of his tentacles, each one transforming into a cloud octopus. By linking their innate abilities to his Dao Foundation and nurturing them over the years with his mana, he managed to cultivate 2 Foundation Establishment realm subordinates. However, they are inherently flawed and ultimately inferior. Master Monk's abilities are vast, naturally far beyond what these creatures could challenge," Huiyao added, following up with a stream of exaggerated praise. His words fully embodied the typical demon mindset of fearing power without genuine loyalty. Quickly changing the subject, he invited, "This old creature has quite the collection of treasures. Let me take you down for a look." Chapter 636, The Profound Method of Continuation, II. The 2 demons reverted to their true forms and dove into the sea. Li Qingheng, after swallowing a pill, calculated that she hadn't even needed to use a single bolt of profound thunder from her thunderpool and followed them leisurely. After some time searching underwater, the group returned empty-handed. Huiyao, visibly frustrated, grabbed Yun Zai Ozi and slapped him a dozen times, demanding the location of his lair. However, Yun Zai Ozi, knowing his fate was sealed, kept his mouth tightly shut and refused to reveal anything. Huiyao and his brother exchanged a sly smile. "My Grace, leave him to us for a bit," one of them suggested. "Keep him alive, I still need him," Li Qingheng ordered. She watched as the serpent fish dove back into the sea, and a thick mist began to rise from the water. Soon, only Li Qingheng and Kung Heng were left on the surface. Kung Heng clasped his hands together, hesitating for a moment with his eyes closed. Meanwhile, Li Qingheng gazed toward the horizon, secretly observing their surroundings. The group had ventured several hundred li deeper, reaching the sea's edge. The spiritual energy in this area grew increasingly sparse, and the sky was an endless expanse of dim darkness. It was said that the spiritual energy here was so thin that even the great void was fractured and unstable. Even cultivators of the Purple Mansion realm, upon reaching this place, would have to descend to lower altitudes to continue flying. At the sea's edge, the water tumbled over, transforming into mist that rose into the air. This created a dense, heavy cloud cover. If a location with abundant spiritual energy could be found amidst this, it would indeed be an excellent place for cultivation. Li Qingheng observed her surroundings for a moment, noticing that sweat had started to form on Kung Heng's face. Finally, the two serpent fish leaped out of the water, handing over Yun Ziozi and taking the lead to guide them further. Yun Ziozi's eyes were tightly shut, his body covered in blood, and he appeared to have lost consciousness. Half of his form had turned into a limp, fleshy mass dripping blood that transformed into golden mist as it rose and dispersed into the interior of Yun Ziozi's lair was empty and slimy, resembling a sea cave. The wet, churning spirit mud created an environment well suited to the cloud octopus tastes. After searching the area for a while, the group began collecting various spirit items. The spirit mud here was unusual. Aside from its foul stench, it had a corrosive property that could penetrate mana and erode the body. While the Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators were unaffected, they still found the smell unbearable. Huiyao, thoroughly disgusted by the environment, dragged Yun Ziozi over and slapped him several dozen more times to vent his frustration. Most of the treasures they found were broken artifacts. Some had been refined by demons, while others were remnants left behind by cultivators. Beyond that, they discovered spirit items, including various forms of spirit water and spiritual qi. Li Qinghong selected a few spears and swords, inspecting the spiritual qi within them. None of them were familiar to her, but she casually picked a few and selected some spirit water that would be useful for juniors practicing perception techniques. In terms of wealth, there is nothing truly remarkable here, just a few rare spirit items to bring back, she thought to herself. After assessing Yun Ziozi's strength earlier, she hadn't held high hopes for the treasures he might possess. Huiyao's earlier boasting about the vastness of his collection was no more than a typical ploy to stir greed. Now that their enemy was no more, Huiyao's cheerful demeanor betrayed no hint of embarrassment. Once the spoils were divided, Huiyao was in excellent spirits. He courteously escorted Li Qinghong and Qingheng back to the island, showing an unusual degree of hospitality. He didn't even bring up the topic of offerings, let alone demand a share of the underwater mineral resources. Li Qinghong, however, remained cautious. She feared the serpent fish might eventually broach the matter of dividing mineral resources, a topic that was highly taboo among the dragon clans. If such a proposal reached the ears of a dragon son, it could lead to serious consequences. She tactfully declined and quietly retreated into seclusion on the island, in the southern borders at Yi Mountains. Li Xunfeng had waited in the southern border for over 2 years before finally being summoned by Taoist master Yuansu. Returning to the entrance of the cave dwelling, he carefully observed the spirit beast statue at its entrance. Sure enough, it resembled the one he had seen in the grotto heaven, giving him confidence as he stepped inside. Yuansu, as always, reclined on his jade platform. Spiritual qi surged below, and white mist swirled about. His gaze lingered on Li Xunfeng for a moment before he spoke softly. "So, you really killed Yu Muxian?" Li Xunfeng kneeled and bowed, replying, "This subordinate acted rashly. I beg the Taoist master's forgiveness." Yuansu shook his head and slowly straightened, his voice light and drifting in the air. "It does not matter. Yunwu must die before I do. When that time comes, even Tang Shedu will not be able to do anything to." He completely ignored Li Xunfeng's words and continued speaking to himself. Suiguan has seen 2 years of continuous rain without pause. That golden feather sect will not remain idle either. Troubled times loom ahead. After a few idle comments, Taoist Master Yuansu stopped talking. Li Xunfeng stepped forward and said, "While in the grotto heaven, this subordinate encountered a spirit beast statue resembling the one at your cave dwelling. From the statue I acquired a gemstone, which I have brought to offer to the Taoist master, the three-eyed Mount Tio beast." Yuansu's interest was piqued. As Li Xunfeng presented the gemstone with both hands, Yuansu gave it a brief glance. The gem was dark in color with what seemed like rippling water inside. Disappointed, he remarked, "It is nothing valuable, just a piece of valley water stone. It is useless to me. Keep it for yourself." He leaned back on the jade platform again. The matter seemed to remind him of something, and he casually asked, "What techniques did you acquire in the grotto?" Li Xunfeng, already prepared, retrieved 3 jade slips from his storage pouch and respectfully replied, "The first is the Clear Dew Origin Manual, said to align with the Taoist master's shared Tao. The second is Meditative Chant, aligned with Fairy Ning Wan's shared Tao. The third is my own Gold Aura Profound Inquiry Technique." Yuansu laughed heartily, the sound echoing for several breaths before he stopped. He then said, "You certainly put thought into this. The Purifying Dew divine ability within the Clear Dew Origin Manual does happen to be the one I lack. Unfortunately, the technique recorded on the 3 drums wall ends at Foundation Establishment Realm, making it useless to me." He slowly sat upright and explained in a soft tone, "When one cultivates their first divine ability in the Purple Mansion realm, they must start anew with the second. It similarly requires a cultivation technique aligned with the Purple Mansion realm to develop. Without such techniques, the path is severed." Li Xunfeng furrowed his brows slightly. Yuansu, resting his chin in his hand, casually asked, "Are you wondering how Kai Wei managed to reach the peak of the Purple Mansion realm, despite 3 of the 5 techniques from the Kai family only extending to Foundation Establishment realm. Although Li Xuanfeng had already deduced the answer, he still bowed respectfully and said, "I ask the Taoist master for guidance." Yuan Su shrugged and explained, "Without Purple Mansion realm techniques, the solution is simple: find a prodigy to cultivate the foundation. Once they have brought the Tao Foundation to the Foundation Establishment realm, consume them through various means, supplement it with Purple Mansion realm spirit items, and guide the transformation into a divine ability." His eyes narrowed in a sly smile as his voice echoed throughout the cave dwelling. There are many ways to achieve this, collectively known as the profound method of continuation. It saves time while extending one's cultivation path. Naturally, the world flocks to it. Yuan Su lamented. After all, most of the Purple Mansion realm techniques were lost during the southern migrations. Each family hoards what remains. Without resorting to such devouring methods, there is no other path forward. Otherwise, you end up like me, stuck on the borders, waiting for death to come. Chapter 637, Retribution and Response. Li Xuanfeng lowered his head, knowing it was not his place to respond. He remained silent as Yuan Su raised his hand and casually said, "Go to the Eastern Sea again and kill for me." With a flick of his wrist, Yuan Su retrieved a piece of cloth from his sleeve, densely packed with names. Among them were prominent surnames and sects, though most of the names were unfamiliar and belonged to young individuals, with only a small portion being Foundation Establishment realm cultivators. Li Xuanfeng nodded, carefully received the list, and tucked it into his robe. Yuan Su then pulled out a jade talisman from his own robe, his voice low. For the first time, his usual lazy demeanor gave way to an air of weariness and age. "This is an artifact from Northern Buddhist cultivators. It can conceal your threat of fate. Use it to kill and avoid being traced." As he watched Li Xuanfeng accept the talisman, Yuan Su waved his hand with little interest. "Go, get it done cleanly within 10 years. Li Xuanfeng bowed and retreated. Once he had left the cave dwelling, he carefully examined the list. On it were names from locations such as Crimson Reef Island, Golden Tang Gate, the Han family, and even people from Profound Peak Gate, Hangzhou Dao Gate, and Azure Pond Sect. The sheer number of cultivators listed was staggering, and their inclusion would almost certainly offend the entire Yue state and the Eastern Sea region. As Li Xuanfeng descended and disappeared into the mist, Ning Heiyuan kneeled on the other side of the jade platform, his face drenched in sweat. Yuan Su slowly stood and moved beside him, his voice soft. "Do you understand?" Ning Heiyuan lowered his gaze, trembling as he said, "Taoist master, is this truly necessary?" Yuan Su, having reached his status as a Taoist master, was naturally meticulous and cunning. He wouldn't rely solely on Ning Heiyuan to secure Li Xuanfeng's loyalty. If the time came when Li Zijai and Li Xuanfeng, both Foundation Establishment realm cultivators, held sway over the sect, and the Li family continued to rise, the question of who would serve whom would be unclear. By secretly ordering Li Xuanfeng to kill these people, Yuan Su ensured the Ning family would have leverage over him. If the matter were ever exposed, it would spell Li Xuanfeng's ruin, leaving him no place to hide. At the same time, once Li Xuanfeng was burdened with these blood debts, Yuan Su wouldn't need to act himself. Li Xuanfeng would sever ties with the Li family entirely, achieving multiple objectives with a single stroke. Still, no matter how much Yuan Su controlled Li Xuanfeng, Ning Heiyuan could not feel the same sense of security as when Yuan Su was alive. Trembling, Ning Heiyuan tearfully pleaded, "Taoist master, I am of little use and still have much to learn from you. Without you, the family would lose its pillar of support." Taoist master. Yuan Su paused briefly, his expression twisting. Beneath his robes, his hand clenched tightly as though suppressing something within himself. A Purple Mansion realm Taoist master's predicament was unlike that of ordinary people in power. When ordinary people grew old, they became senile, weak, and powerless to act on their desires. But a Purple Mansion realm cultivator retained their divine abilities and full consciousness until their very last breath. They could do nothing but watch as their own end approached, with the signs of their imminent demise looming over them. This terrifying clarity surpassed that of mortal death by 1,000-fold. Thus, it was not uncommon for Purple Mansion realm cultivators to wreak havoc in their final days, unleashing violence on friends and family alike. Ning Heiyuan had heard of such cases before. Seeing Yuan Su's darkening expression, he quickly fell silent. After several long breaths, Yuan Su slowly opened his eyes. His face twisted with malice as he stepped forward and spat out a single word, "Leave." Ning Heiyuan quickly scrambled out of the cavern, the jingling of his footsteps echoing in the quiet as the stone door closed heavily behind him. Yuan Su was left standing alone in the cave dwelling. Ning Tiaxiao clenched his teeth in silence and let out a deep breath. As the mist inside the cave dwelling dissipated, faint ghostly lights emerged on the stone walls, revealing exquisitely detailed faces etched into the surface. Ning Tiaxiao stared intently at these faces, counting their numbers. With a quick calculation, despair washed over him. He He muttered in a low voice, "Burn the records, erase the names, replace the real with the false, and confuse truth with illusion. The world will have no clear path to follow." Brother Quinn, Ning Tianxiao continued absent-mindedly. Kai Wei once said, "In a world where the righteous path is sealed, all crooked paths become the righteous way." Brother Quinn, my life span is nearing its end. I have not encountered any immortals. Instead, I have drunk the blood of the people for 100 years and committed countless evils. All that is left is to wait for death. As the mist gradually rose, his figure disappeared into the swirling white vapor. Bowing his head as if in repentance, the spirit water flowing across the ground ceased its motion and began to float silently. "For this is the only way to protect our clan." His voice reverberated in the cave dwelling. Taoist Master Yuan Su is planning for the matters after his death. This is a token of allegiance. Li Xuanfeng left the cave dwelling and flew straight back to his residence. Only upon arriving did he take out the list of names to examine it carefully. As he narrowed his eyes at the list, his hands trembled slightly. One name after another surfaced in his mind, and as he had expected, many of the families listed had close ties with the Li family. Yuan Su, what a masterstroke. Li Xuanfeng sighed. Saying nothing, Li Xuanfeng walked into his residence in a daze. In the courtyard, Ning Hemian was sitting under the warm sunlight. A child sat nearby, reading aloud. For a moment, Li Xuanfeng stopped in his tracks, crossing his arms as though caught in a distant memory. It was a scene so familiar: soft sunlight, a tranquil courtyard, and even a featherless wild goose wandering aimlessly about. Yet this was Yi Mountain City, where the imposing atmosphere discouraged geese from flying above. The Ning family's thresholds, carved with formation patterns, were far too high for a goose to enter. "Dear husband," Ning Hemian exclaimed in joy, raising her head. Her bright eyes sparkled with happiness, shaking Li Xuanfeng to his core. Her gentle words, spoken softly, didn't register with him. Inside, his emotions surged violently, making him feel nauseous. Two faces flashed back and forth in his mind, causing him to clench his teeth until they almost shattered. Pale-faced, Li Xuanfeng stood there motionless, haunted by the memory of his wife and child's brutal deaths. The horrifying scene interwove with the present reality, forcing long-buried memories to surface despite his efforts to suppress them. He panted heavily until Ning Hemian approached and lightly shook his arm, her gaze filled with concern and affection. Only then did the shadows in his mind recede. He waved his hand lightly, signaling that he was fine. Quickly regaining composure, his face returned to normal. He sat for a moment on a stone bench, his eyes vacant and unfocused. Who was he supposed to take revenge on? He knew much of the truth now. The deal between Kai Wei and Jiang Boking had forced Golden Tang Gate to strike southward. At the time, Kai Jian had refused to dirty his hands, leaving the Ning family to oversee matters covertly. But Kai Wei was dead, and so was Jiang Boking, who now could bear the brunt of his vengeance. Should he target Ning Wan, who orchestrated the matter, or the Ning family as a whole? Should he lay the blame entirely on the Kai family? Lost in thought, Li Xuanfeng grasped his golden bow and shut his eyes tightly. Now I have been ordered to kill, to massacre families allied to my own, merely as a token of allegiance. How is this any different from what Golden Tang Gate, the Ning family, and the Dogs of Azure Pond sect did before? Li Xuanfeng lamented, "How am I any better than the one who murdered Yuer and my son? I have enjoyed the wealth of the immortal clans, taken a wife and sired children. If Yuer knew, she would surely spit on me in disgust." His brow furrowed deeply, and his face darkened with grief. His lips trembled, and as night quickly fell, it felt as though a cold, venomous fire consumed him from within, leaving him frozen and dazed. Chapter 638, Retribution and Response. II. The courtyard was now empty, with only Ning Hemian sitting softly beside him. She clasped his hand silently, her expression calm and patient. He raised his eyes to look at her, but the words refused to come out. His throat felt like it was full of thorns. After a long pause, his trembling voice finally broke the silence. "Minor, the Taoist master has ordered me to kill." Ning Hemian, ever perceptive, lowered her gaze as she took the list of names from his hand. Slowly gripping his hand tighter, she forced herself to say, "This is a token of allegiance." Li Xuanfeng's heart felt like a cold stone, lodged deep and immovable, as he watched Ning Hemian, her face pale, begin to read aloud, "Xiao Fu, the sixth grandson of Xiao Kong Yusun, the nephew of Kong Yu himself. Cheng Zunan, an inner disciple of Sword Gate, though not highly regarded, still a member of Sword Gate, Taoist master. What is he thinking?" Ning Hemian abruptly stood, her face as white as paper as she prepared to rise with the wind, but Li Xuanfeng caught her wrist, his lips bloodless as he spoke in a low voice, "Our family killed Yu Muxian." The words struck Ning Hemian like thunder. She slumped back into her seat, staring at Li Xuanfeng, who refused to meet her gaze, his eyes fixed on the ground. The two sat in silence, husband and wife, with no words to bridge the gulf between them. Finally, Li Xuanfeng spoke, "There is no other way forward. If the heavens and earth condemn me, let the punishment fall upon me alone. I will not allow it to implicate others." Ning Hemian's hands slowly fell to her sides as she sat quietly, watching him. Under the moonlight, his temples had turned completely white. In September, the rain fell incessantly. Famine had already begun to spread in the surrounding areas. Stable factions managed to survive better. As long as Qi cultivators could soar with the wind, they could always trade for abundant grain elsewhere. In the fertile lands of Jiangnan, starvation could be avoided with effort. The Yu family had fragmented into 6 or 7 smaller clans, allowing the townsfolk to live slightly better lives. With their population thinned, these newly established clans were eager to recruit cultivators of humble origins. Additionally, under the warnings issued by the Li family, they generously distributed grain to avoid conflict. Li Qingliao was in the main hall, holding his young heir on his lap as they read together. Suddenly, a figure entered from below. The man, clad in armor and carrying a massive golden hammer in one hand, was tall and imposing Li Wen. As a rare talent among the Li family's branch members, Li Wen had steadily risen to the peak of his power. Loyal and steadfast, his twin golden hammers had guarded several generations of clan heads, though they were rarely needed. Li Qingliao had gradually taken over authority from Li Zicheng, and Li Wen had become a banner under his command, signaling his clear succession as the family's head. Li Qingliao treated the old retainer with respect. After setting his son, Li Xiaowei, down from his lap, he looked up. The burly man spoke. "Master, Lord Lu has come to see you." Master Lu. Li Qingliao wasn't surprised. Master Lu was the one responsible for Yu Mugao's death and the Yu family's subsequent fragmentation. He was about to ask further when Li Wen continued. He has been intercepted by Senior Wushao over the lake. Unable to advance or retreat, Senior Wushao has summoned Ancestor Ziming, and the three are currently at a standoff. Li Wen, despite his rugged demeanor, spoke slowly and deliberately. The gravity of the situation was clear. Li Qingliao raised an eyebrow, quickly stood, and hurried outside. As he ascended with the wind, he asked, "He is merely a Qi cultivator. How could he warrant the attention of 2 Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators?" He hesitated briefly but soared into the sky, observing from a distance. Master Lu, dressed in flowing white robes and holding a fan, landed gracefully on the lake's surface. He faced the Foundation Establishment Realm demon before him without a trace of fear. Taking a few steps into the air, he noticed a man in golden Taoist robes flying in his direction. Once the two joined together, Master Lu finally restrained the frivolity on his face, offering a fist cup with a smile. "A visit from an old friend. Would the two of you invite me in for a seat?" Li Wushao's expression darkened as he fixed his gaze on Master Lu. This man was clearly at the Mid-Foundation Establishment Realm, making it impossible for him to be just a guest cultivator of the Yu family. Li Wushao stood ready, awaiting Li Ziming's command. Li Ziming, though feeling uncertain in his heart, forced himself to stand firm. Despite being out of practice, his upbringing and etiquette gave him just enough composure to respond appropriately. With a calm demeanor, he gestured and said, "Please, fellow Taoist." Master Lu showed no sign of concern and followed the two into the formation. Once inside, he chuckled softly and cupped his fist again. "I am Jiang Heqian. I once had the honor of joining hands with Taoist Tanya against a mutual enemy. I wonder if your esteemed clan still remembers." These words sent a chill down Li Ziming's spine. He had read the family histories and was well aware of who Jiang Heqian was. Years ago, during the Yu family's peak prosperity, with 2 Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators overseeing their affairs, they had established the Milan marketplace to further expand their influence. However, this had simultaneously infringed on the interests of many factions, even drawing the dissatisfaction of the Xiao family. In response, Li Tanya had united various forces, not only killing the ancestor of Yu family but also destroying their market. During this assault, he had collaborated with Fei Wangbai and Jiang Heqian, a descendant of the Jiang family. This partnership had dealt a severe blow to the Yu family. Jiang Heqian played a pivotal role in the incident, enabling the Yu family's grand formation to be easily breached. Li Ziming had only read about this name in the family's history books, yet now, seeing the man in person, he felt as though a figure from history had stepped into the present, bringing with it a profound sense of the passage of time. However, this feeling was soon replaced by an intense sense of dread. This man is the last survivor of the Jiang family. The Jiang family was founded by outer disciples of the Moonlight Origin Mansion. Countless factions have sought him over the years, but his whereabouts had always remained unknown. And to think he disguised himself as a mere Qi cultivation realm guest cultivator, endured decades in the Yu family, orchestrated the death of Yu Mugao, and ultimately caused the Yu family's fragmentation. At this thought, a moment of realization dawned on Li Ziming. No wonder the Yu family, once a big clan, lacked any means of maintaining stability and crumbled so easily. If not for Yunwu Peak's intervention, the Yu family wouldn't have lasted this long. So it was all his doing, pulling the strings from the shadows. An eye for an eye, blood repaid with blood. Back in its heyday, the Jiang family had been a powerful force. The Yuan and families had been subordinate branches of the Jiang family. However, after the Jiang family's main lineage fell from power, several surrounding immortal gates had quietly pushed its downfall, leaving it shattered. The Yu family had been the greatest beneficiary of the Jiang family's collapse, producing numerous talents over the following decades and rising to prominence. Yet Jiang Heqian, through a century of patience, had methodically delivered his revenge, returning the favor. As the initial wave of disbelief passed, Li Ziming mulled it over and found that the plan was indeed feasible. The Jiang family's inheritance likely included techniques for concealing one's aura. While these techniques might not fool Foundation Establishment realm cultivators of equal rank, they were more than enough to deceive Qi cultivators. After Yu Xiaogui's death, the Yu family no longer had any Foundation Establishment realm cultivators. No one remained who could uncover Jiang Heqian's true cultivation level. Even spies from other factions, at most possessing moderate cultivation, would not have been able to see through him. Ingenious, truly ingenious, Li Ziming praised inwardly. Jiang Heqian seemed thoroughly satisfied with the expression on Li Ziming's face, as if savoring the gratification of a long-sought revenge. He let out a hearty laugh, pointing northward, and said with a smirk, "With Yu Mugao's head in this grand gift, does your clan find it satisfactory?" His laughter grew wilder, carrying a hint of madness, but he eventually calmed, his tone turning somewhat regretful. "It is just a pity. Taoist Tanya and Wangbai cannot witness this with their own eyes. It would have made the revenge all the sweeter." Chapter 639, Yuan Fao, I. Jiang Heqian sighed and glanced at Li Ziming. Suddenly, Li Ziming's curiosity was piqued, and he asked, "There is one question that troubles me. Back then, what happened to Fei Wangbai?" "Wangbai." Jiang Heqian took a few steps and seated himself at the head of the table. Picking up a teacup, he replied lightly, "Naturally, he was killed by an immortal sect." "Which sect, if I may ask?" Li Ziming paused, his confusion evident. Jiang Heqian immediately cursed. "How would I know? Do you think immortal sects are trustworthy? Even Yue cultivating sect, if their interests were threatened, they would kill without hesitation." Jiang Heqian continued, "Wangbai had a shared Dao with Taoist master Shang Yuan of Yue cultivating sect. Yue cultivating sect has an alchemy technique that could refine him to nourish Shang Yuan. Azure Pond sect was bound to want him dead eventually." Jiang Heqian gave Li Ziming a sideways glance, and before he could respond, Jiang Heqian spoke casually, "But what about your Li family? With your connection to the bright Yang Dao lineage, why did Li Tongya choose to cultivate pit water?" Li Ziming replied evenly, "At the time our family had fallen into decline. Cultivation resources were scarce, so he had no choice but to pursue pit water." Jiang Heqian paused briefly, having only mentioned the topic in passing. Hearing Li Ziming's response, he felt no need to engage further in meaningless chatter and continued, "Since your esteemed family killed Yu Muxian, did you obtain the Foundation Establishment Realm artifact, Jade Smoke Mountain? After all, it was once an heirloom of my clan. If it is in your possession, I would like to offer an exchange." Li Ziming shook his head and replied, "You misunderstand, senior. That person died within the Grotto Heaven but did not bring the artifact with him. It is likely still on Yuanwu Peak." Li Ziming avoided delving too deeply into the matter and replied politely, "Such trivial matters hardly warrant troubling you, senior. Our elders have made appropriate arrangements." Jiang Heqian chuckled and said, "Let me offer a word of advice for the sake of old ties. Be cautious. The downfall of my family is still a recent memory. If another Jiang family were to rise here, without earning the trust of Azure Pond sect or Golden Feather sect, it would surely be destined to splinter into pieces." His expression carried a hint of mockery, and his tone felt more like ridicule. Li Ziming found it difficult to respond and simply fist-cupped in acknowledgement. After a brief pause, Jiang Heqian continued softly, "I mean the trust of Azure Pond sect, not Yuansu. How much longer does Yuansu have to live? He cannot secure anything for you." With a flick of his sleeve, Jiang Heqian threw out this statement, seeming to lose interest in the conversation. Lowering his gaze, he said, "Revenge has been served. The Yu family's blood feud has been repaid in full. I will spend the rest of my days wandering the world. I will not return to the lakes. The Jiang family is but a wisp of smoke now, and this matter ends here." With that, he stepped out of the court. As if remembering something, he retrieved an item from his storage pouch. It was round and heavy, with black hair cascading down, a severed head. The eyes were clouded gray, the skin taut, and the mouth slightly ajar, revealing a dark, gaping void. "This is Yu Mugao's head," he said, tossing it onto the ground before departing on the wind. Li Ziming picked up the head and gave it a quiet glance. Yu Mugao had once sparred with Li Yunjiao and others in secret, but this was the fate he had met. He gave instructions, "Take this to the elders and in Jian for them to see. Let it ease their grievances. Then bring it to my uncle's grave as an offering to our ancestors." Li Wuxiao bowed and carried the head away. Li Ziming, meanwhile, adjusted his robes and returned to his chambers to resume his secluded cultivation. Yu Mugao's head was passed around among the clan members. Some wept, others laughed. For most of the elders, it was a moment of catharsis. However, none were as emotional as Njayan, who shed hot tears. After it had made its rounds, Li Xuanxuan hurried down and took the head up the mountain. Li Yuanxiu's death had been one of the greatest sorrows of Li Xuanxuan's life. Though he had endured much suffering, his hatred had not diminished, it had only deepened over time. It was like his left eye, scarred by demonic flames. Though it caused no pain on ordinary days when he squinted, it burned with a searing heat, a constant reminder that his wounds remained unhealed. Li Yuexiang accompanied the old man up the mountain, watching as he spoke quietly to the gravestone. The severed head sat on the altar, motionless and silent. Li Yuexiang stayed with him for half a day. Only when someone came up the mountain to summon her did she prepare to leave. Looking closely, she saw it was Li Wush. Li Wushou kneeled on one knee and said softly, "Miss, someone from the Yuan family has arrived." Li Yuexiang had no choice but to leave the graveyard. She descended the mountain and flew to the central hall of Lijiang Town. Outside the hall stood a line of attendants. Before she even entered, she could already hear Li Qingleo's voice. "Senior, you are being too polite. There is no need for this." As she stepped inside, she saw two attendants at the rear and two individuals standing at the front. One was an elderly man with neatly combed white hair, tall and imposing, with the cultivation level of an early-stage foundation establishment realm. He looked to be about 180 years old and wore a beaming smile. The man was speaking earnestly, saying, "Do not say such things. Even this foundation establishment realm cultivation of mine is thanks to nephew Yuanjiao. Not to mention the essence gathering pill he gave me, even the idea of breaking through was inspired by him." Li Yuexiang's arrival interrupted their conversation. Li Qingleo quickly stepped forward with a smile and said, "Aunt, you are here. This is Senior Yuan Haiyuan and young Master Yuan Fao." The speaker was Yuan Haiyuan, who had broken through to foundation establishment realm at the age of 100. Though his success was largely due to the essence-gathering pill, it was undeniably a stroke of luck. The elderly man now appeared decades younger, radiating the demeanor of a high cultivator who had achieved the Tao. As for the young man standing behind him, he was strikingly handsome, tall, and wore a calm expression. Draped in luxurious robes, he carried an air of nobility. Given that Yuan Chengdan was already quite good-looking, Yuan Fao naturally inherited these traits. Among cultivators, his appearance was exceptional. Li Yuexiang glanced at him briefly and noticed the astonishment in his eyes as he looked at her. Several chests of spirit treasures were displayed in the hall, indicating that Yuan Haiyuan had gone to great lengths to show the importance of this visit. Li Yuexiang responded politely, and Yuan Haiyuan's joy was evident as he eagerly approached, speaking in a low voice, "I had some connections with your father. It is a pity what happened to you." Li Yuexiang, accustomed to such comments, quickly shifted the topic and turned her attention to Yuan Fao. Yuan Haiyuan immediately began introducing him, saying some flattering words. Just then, another figure arrived. The newcomer was an elderly man with white hair hurrying in. It was Li Xuanxuan, whose aged voice carried a trace of apology. "I deeply apologize, Senior. All the foundation establishment realm cultivators in the family are currently in seclusion. King Hung has gone to the Eastern Sea, so only a chief cultivator like me was available to greet you." Yuan Haiyuan waved his hand dismissively and replied, "It is no bother at all. With someone of your stature coming to receive me, it is already a great honor. Why should there be any formality between our two families?" Their conversation was warm and friendly, full of mutual politeness, leaving Li Yuexiang and Yuan Fao awkwardly standing to the side. Seeing this, Li Zicheng smiled and said, "Yuexiang, why not take the young master to enjoy the lake scenery?" The two left together, and only then did Yuan Haiyuan's smile fade, his expression turning serious as he said, "Are you aware of the current state of my family?" Li Xuanxuan hesitated for a moment before answering, "I know a bit." Chapter 640, Yuan Fao II. Yuan Haiyuan deliberated for a moment, his voice lowering as he said, "Now, if both Chengdan and the others do not return, the future will be hard to predict. Fao is Chengdan's only son. I can only entrust him to your family's care. This was something Chengdan arranged with you earlier." Yuan Haiyuan's expression became increasingly strained. His aged face twitched slightly, and he finally said, "I have come here today, swallowing my pride, to ask if your family can spare a foundation establishment realm cultivator to assist us." Li Xuanxuan was stunned, momentarily at a loss for words. Thanks to Li Zijai's earlier reminder, he already understood that the Yuan family was in chaos, unsure of how deeply involved they were with Azure Pawn Sec's plans. He had no intention of getting entangled. While offering protection to Yuan Chengdan's descendants was a minor matter that wouldn't pose significant risks, actively intervening was an entirely different issue. Being a cautious individual by nature, Li Xuanxuan only wanted to protect the family's prodigy for a few more years. The difficulty of the situation was clearly written on his face. Seeing this, Yuan Haiyuan lowered his voice further and said, "I understand the trouble with Yuanjiao's situation and that your family is facing turbulent times, but as for my family..." Yuan Haiyuan understood his family's precarious situation all too well. Yet as an elder, he desperately clung to the hope of salvaging what remained, unwilling to give up. Having exhausted every possible connection, he could only turn to the Li family for help. Li Xuanxuan sighed inwardly and decided to hint at his position. Senior, this reign has lasted far too long. Li Xuanxuan offered some comfort. Your family has deep roots. You will weather this storm. Yuan Haiyuan remained silent. Being at the eye of the storm left him little to say. He cupped his fist and took his leave. Meanwhile, Li Yuexiang excused herself from the gathering. Yuan Faya walked alongside her as they exited the hall and sighed. Watching them trade polite pleasantries feels so meaningless. Li Yuexiang lowered her gaze, blinking slightly, and responded, Our two families have had a long-standing alliance. Naturally, there is much to discuss. Yuan Faya nodded quickly, adopting an agreeable stance. In truth, Yuan Faya had not been in a good mood during the journey. He was strongly opposed to the idea of an arranged marriage. However, Yuan Haiyuan's authority was absolute, leaving him with no room to argue, and he begrudgingly accompanied the elder. Along the way, he calculated ways to extricate himself. After all, the marriage had not been finalized yet. If he could find some excuse such as incompatible personalities, it might still be possible to withdraw. But as soon as he laid eyes on Li Yuexiang, he was utterly captivated. Her beauty was otherworldly, and all his grievances vanished like smoke. He stared at her, nodding repeatedly, his earlier thoughts entirely forgot. He silently marveled, what a stunning woman. Such beauty is rare, even among cultivators. Li Yuexiang appeared unaware of his admiration. She guided him across the lake, making casual conversation. Suddenly, Yuan Faya noticed the large dam spanning the lake and asked with some curiosity, What is this for, raising spirit fish? Li Yuexiang answered gently, It is to block the lake water and protect the people. Yuan Faya sighed repeatedly and said, My family is far behind yours in this regard. With this endless rain, I have suggested several times to my family that we send cultivators to help manage things in the plains, but they always dismiss it as a waste of manpower. It turned out that Yuan Faya, under Yuan Chengdun's arrangement, had been managing towns and commoners in Mushroom Forest Plain. With this opening, he began discussing matters of governance in detail, how to regulate livelihoods, manage the populace, and ensure their welfare. His insights were surprisingly profound. Hearing this, Li Yuexiang nodded internally, though her expression remained calm and pleasant. She responded with a soft smile, Cultivators may not fear the rain, but the people by the lake suffer greatly. Yuan Faya had a moment of realization, and while his face betrayed no change, he thought, the Li family's reputation for caring for its people is well-deserved. Li Yuexiang had little interest in discussing such topics further. She redirected the conversation to inquire about recent news. Yuan Faya enthusiastically shared various tales and observations, speaking at length about distant lands and scattered events. Li Yuexiang listened politely without much engagement. Suddenly he asked, Did my father leave any message or item for me when he visited your family? Li Yuexiang narrowed her eyes slightly, thinking to herself, It seems Yuan Chengdun went straight to the Eastern Sea without leaving any instructions for his family. Without any intention of keeping the betrothal gifts for herself, she replied softly, He did leave a betrothal gift. It is in the central hall. You may ask Senior Haiyuan about it. She hadn't expected that her words would cause Yuan Faya, who had been reserved and deferential, to suddenly straighten his back and lift his chin slightly. Confidence seemed to fill him, and he responded with a simple hum. The two chatted a while longer until Yuan Haiyuan emerged from the hall, accompanied by a retinue. He addressed Yuan Faya, saying, You will stay here to cultivate for now. For any matters, consult Yuexiang. Yuan Faya seemed a bit caught off guard and could only nod blankly. Yuan Haiyuan gave a polite smile to Li Yuexiang and then flew away on the wind. Yuan Faya's cave dwelling had already been prepared. Li Yuexiang escorted him and his attendants there and quickly took her leave. Once inside, Yuan Faya instructed his attendants to inspect the dwelling, then sat down to drink tea. On his left, one of his trusted aides asked, Young master, what do you think of the Li family's young lady? Yuan Faya paused for a moment before praising, She is truly a beauty, but she is also full of schemes. The aide leaned in and asked quietly, Full of schemes? Yuan Faya nodded with some difficulty and said, I have heard that she has an older brother cultivating within the sect who has already reached the foundation establishment realm. If I marry her, I am afraid my branch will only end up obeying the Li family's commands. The aides exchanged glances, unsure how to respond. They dared not speak ill of the woman from the Li family. If she were to truly become their mistress and inquire into such matters, the consequences would not be light. Suddenly, Yuan Faya spoke again in a low voice. Go and find out how much my father prepared for the Li family. See if there is any way to reclaim it. The aide quickly excused himself, while Yuan Faya remained seated, pondering silently. I need to find a way to retrieve those resources. I cannot keep living under the Li family's shadow with everything falling into their hands. Meanwhile, Li Yuexiang had returned. Li Xuanxuan soon came to find her, having just finished receiving updates. He hurried over, determined to assess matters for his granddaughter. Upon seeing Li Yuexiang enter, he quickly asked, "How was it?" Li Yuexiang waved her hand dismissively, and seeing that her grandfather didn't appear overly concerned, replied, "This Yuan File seems to understand the needs of the common people. Beyond that, he is rather glib and seems to possess a bit of cleverness. His personality, however, leans toward mediocrity and greed. That said, his actions appear to remain within the bounds of propriety. Whether it is genuine or merely a facade, I will need to observe him further." "What?" Li Xuanxun was taken aback and blurted, "How can he be like that? Are you sure you have judged him correctly?" Li Yuexiang, relying on her own observations, began to feel slightly uncertain under her grandfather's questioning. She responded hesitantly, "I have not met too many people while on the mountain, so perhaps my assessment is not entirely accurate. It is just unfortunate that my brother is in seclusion." Li Xuanxun waved his hand dismissively and said, "That makes it easier. I will have Li Qinglio and the others test him. There is no need for you to deal with this yourself."